The following video contains content some viewers might find disturbing. The views and opinions expressed here are not facts and are nothing more than entertainment. The views and opinions are not facts and do not represent the views and opinions of Xirtus or our channel, and do not necessarily represent or reflect the views of the guests, YouTube, Google, mainstream media, society, or civilization at large, or anybody. Viewer discretion is advised.
But there. Was that good?
All right. Well, after difficulties, we are here on Wednesday Ultra and with a special guest from Think Tank. How's it going, David Blake?
Oh, hi. I didn't realize I was a special guest. Thank you.
Oh, you're a special guy. Ollie. And Seth's here as well. What's up, Seth? How you been?
Doing good, man. I'm working on my little backdrop. I got a little light strip going now, so
I really like it. Yeah, it just the shadows and the subsurface scattering. And Doug,
thank you.
I get 5-star hotel vibes. That's what I get. I'm feeling like it costs too much for me to be here.
I was right out. From here down, I'm in a hot tub.
I was gonna say like the next most glamorous thing. It's true. I mean, like, yeah, you better put on a Ritz kind of vibe, Seth. But I mean, all week I've been like just pumped and excited about Doug's working on the Single Swan series. He's gonna be putting out stuff. I'm like, dude, he's getting in limousines. He's changing the world. He's telling them how things should be. And
I'm remote
like,
viewing
right.
success for the book. Yes.
They're like, exactly. Well, couldn't say it better myself. God. And then Jay's asking in the chat, did I travel to California? No, I tried to travel to California last week.
What happened?
Grounded all flights.
What happened?
Then this email I got. Where's my phone? It was just this random email that said we couldn't process your ticket, or we had to refund you, or like all this other stuff. And I was like, wait, why can't I fly now? So that kind of changed my plans.
Wow.
You know, but I'm figuring that out. I don't know. So that's really strange, and I always wonder about what's going on with that. But
No fly list. You're a domestic terrorist now.
Hey, the universe conspires for you. It's working out. It's working.
It's not like I wanted to go to California. So it's like the fact I had to is the thing. I hope that I can figure out solve.
What kind of rat bastard psychotic actually wants to go to California? No,
yeah, you know what I mean? Like, God.
Artists have to be as close to the hell mouth as possible. If you can build
I always wanted sorry. Front row tickets to the apocalypse. I've always wanted that. I'm just saying, you know.
That's how you got to be where the action's at, man.
I mean, the tannery, it's a good way to go, I guess. But okay, so thinking about California in general, like my boss, Brian Prispek, he used to say, and I love to use his whole name when he tells the story in case any California hears it. But he's like, my grandmother, she used to tell me that when the world opened up, it just cracked open. And then everyone held on. And whoever couldn't hold on, they just slid down and they fell to the bottom. And that is California. And that was like, and I think he meant it though. He's like, that's like, I mean, you know, like I feel silly telling you my grandmother felt this way, but that's, you know, how I feel about you. It's like,
it's so funny because the whole first half of my life, everyone would do anything to get to California, including me. Yeah. And in the town I went to high school,
and that's what
there's a statue of Horace Greeley, and it's like, go west, young man. And everyone was trying to go west, the gold rush, the golden coast, because everything was golden about it, you know?
God, I remember all those poor kids who ended up in California and who would do anything to be in California. And it was terrifying, like Skid Row and everything, you know?
You know, walls work two ways. You know what I mean? Like when you say you want a wall, you know, an open air prison is not that far removed. And I have to say, like, when it comes, like, I get the idea, I get the argument. And it's strange because I'm like, you know, how many people are moving to Mexico now from America? It is a lot of people are moving to Mexico to the point where the Mexican government's like, okay, all right, this is a bit much. But, you know, there's always this assumption. It's like, you know, will America be the place that people want to be indefinitely? Or, you know, how many people?
I think it's a melting pot. It's designed to burn off impurities and to destroy. And by impurities, I mean your and my culture, right? Our cultures, in order to build a Babylonian hegemony. And then from there, you can't do any more here. You got to get out, right? Unless you own the system, you go to another country and you continue to infect it.
Was it a Alex Jones documentary from years ago where he was showing the FEMA facilities across the country, these places, and you know they were paying for electricity, but the thing is, like the barbed wire like pointed inwards, and that was like the thing. You were like, what's that about?
We were talking on Think Tank a couple weeks ago about the kitchen sink and how, and Adam was on the show yesterday, was talking about, like, do you remember when they like basically destroyed the kitchen sink because we were talking about this stuff? But I had made a meme, and because they were like, oh my God, there are people here that don't resolutely think that they need to assassinate Trump. There are people here that think that, you know, Trump could be allowed to just continue on. That was kind of how it felt. It was like, if you were just
right, but what a tragedy that would be. Dude, for the left, that would have been a tragedy because it would just been like this crazy martyrdom thing, and then you're going to a whole other level of something.
Then you would have really created the dream that they wanted, the James Dean of Trump. But so then I made that meme, and I remember you saw it, and I remember we hung out like for the first time in a while right afterwards, and it was the one where it was Trump in front of the wall wearing the Bane mask. It's all red and his eyes are glowing. It's like, you don't understand. You're not trapped in here. I'm not trapped in here with you. You're trapped in here with me, you know? And it was like right the night he announced he was going to build the wall.
Right. Well,
I have a good Trump mud flood tie-in. In 2019, he was doing some event with a bunch of climate scientists, and they were like, "The Earth's going to get very hot." I'm paraphrasing, and he goes, "But I think first it's going to get very cold." And they were like, and he goes, "You may be surprised."
Yeah, right.
It's the jet stream. But speaking of the Bane thing with Trump, was that his inauguration speech where there was some direct lines from that Christopher Nolan Batman film? I feel like
it was more than some. It was incredibly similar to this. So, and another, it was verbatim parts of it. We are not merely transferring power from one administration or from one party to another, but we are transferring power from Washington, D.C. and giving it back to you, the people.
Yeah.
And we are giving it back to you, the people. It was just so good. And like, you can cut, And for a long time, a small group in our nation's capital, this is where you're like, come on, for a long time in our capital, in our fair city of Gotham, too long, reap the rewards of government with the people. It's like back and forth, like honestly. And then afterwards, you're like, oh, really? Was it similar? Huh? It's just like,
but that guy, that had to have been a joke, you know.
Oh, it was the best trolling move they possibly did.
Did somebody wrote it for him, right? I mean, I know Obama wrote all his own speeches, which is kind of incredible.
No way, that's not true. His speechwriters have books out.
Yeah, that's fucking.
That's not true at all. His speechwriters have released books. I mean, they're like famous people now.
Of Barack Obama, so that was a lie. I mean, I'm open to it being a lie. I'm just saying, like, I heard that so many times that he wrote all his own speeches. Although I don't know if I heard that after 2 years into his presidency. Yeah. So it may have been his early speeches, and they said it and they attributed it to all his speeches or something. Oh, I remember that was the thing.
Even the DNC speech he got, I forget, but it's whoever wrote that got a whole bunch of acclaim. The guy who gave
wasn't it Bill? Oh, I'm sorry. Wasn't it Bill? Was it Bill Stein who wrote speeches for both Nixon and Kennedy? Is that true? Was that a thing?
I know Oliver Stone took over after, right? No. John Oliver? What's no. What's his name?
John Oliver writing presidential speeches?
Roger, who's the guy? Roger. Seth knows.
Roger Stone?
Come on.
Roger Stone.
Roger Stone.
Oh, yeah.
God, I always do that. It bothers me. Are they
related?
So much. I hope to God not, but they seem very similar in the worst parts of
that
themselves.
would be crazy, though.
Yeah.
No.
Having said that, is anyone dressed better ever in their lives? I feel like
he's got a Nixon tattoo. Does that count as dressing when you get a huge Nixon face on your?
I feel like Steve-O and Roger Stone, they're just on the same level. I don't know. This is kind of fun. Yes, Nazis were bad, but WEF says we must track racial COVID data. So they're starting to figure this out around the ideas of what race is and collecting it. And they're saying, hey, I know you don't like it, but there actually are genetic issues like sickle cell anemia that we need to account for that aren't present in every single group of the populations around the world. And if we do this, we'll be able to selectively help people, right? And then everyone else is like, well, that's crazy. But at the same time, they're asking you about ethnic data that's collected that seems to be used for financial insurance data. So say,
it's like they're claiming it's like they've never heard of the idea before. Like maybe for the first time in American history, we might try tracking race. Isn't that the whole point of like they're telling you women get this amount of cents on the dollar and black people do this and get it this
right? Well, I mean, the fact that black
all
people
they do is track racial projections.
Right. The fact that black people die on average, or they did in the 20th century, before the retirement age, and that they were doing these kinds of studies then shows you that there was a selective targeting to, I mean, it's kind of sad because people want to say that racism doesn't exist or that, the white supremacy question is completely farcical. But I mean, it's not about that. It's just about the facts that there are insurance companies that are targeting people and the entire demographics of people based on race. The same thing's done to Irish. The same things. It's not just one group of the population. And they're using it and they're saying, okay, you're not allowed to know this data because it's wrong. It's emotionally hurtful. Yet we're going to use it to say everybody with sickle cell anemia that has the possibility to even get it because of their race. But
how long ago was the Tuskegee experiment? When was the Tuskegee experiment?
60? Not long ago enough.
50s or 60s, yeah.
Yeah, so like even you'll hear in people's speeches
32 and
sometimes
72.
the way people treat
Oh,
that,
sorry.
the wording that they use for it, it's like this whole thing around like sacrifice, like their
Right.
willed sacrifice when they were oblivious to what they were actually doing. Like the whole thing is just so insane. But it's also, I mean, the problem isn't just that this occurred, or we could go over different atrocities, you know, MK Ultra shit, whatever. But it's like, you know, this was the CDC. Like this wasn't that long ago. In 1976, the head of the CDC was on 60 Minutes and got called out fucking lying about the swine flu vaccine, that they did a bait and switch where they gave them another medication than the one that they were supposedly thought that they were getting. And it was like this, and I think it was 25 reports. They didn't have VAERS at the time in America. Like, you know, you have yellow card in the UK or whatever, but like people advertised for this. I was like, Mary Tyler Moore and stuff like apologized afterwards. It was 25 recorded adverse reactions was enough to pull the vaccine in 1976 for swine flu. And so like, I'm just saying like this was the CDC behind that, and the attitudes of the people with the CDC doesn't, the way they talk about, even if they're talking about this particular event, it doesn't come across like they're like, you know, that they saw it even as a problem.
God, I wish I could remember. What's it called with where you're trying to protect endangered species laws, like the endangered species laws?
Don't know.
Oh my God! Because the thing I remember learning about this and in school, how
Conservation
crazy.
laws? No.
There's some interesting endangered species conservation laws that have to do with, they're paradoxical. So let's say, for instance, that you've got a hill, and on one side of the hill you have a bunch of these groundhogs, but on the other side of the hill you don't. There's only maybe like one or two, or there's not, maybe none at all almost, but there's a few. So what you do is you say, okay, well, the one hill that has tons of groundhogs, they're vermin. I mean, they're just everywhere. So we don't really need to protect them. The other hill that doesn't have them, that they haven't chosen to live on, that's the one where they're endangered. So we need to protect the ones that are living there. And so what they do is they kill off the healthy populations, and then they target it's very anti-Darwinist. It's there's almost no possible way this is an accident, that they're using anti-Darwinism on nature now beyond just what they've done to humans of different populations. And that's a dangerous thing for nature, because these species are not just bums like humans. They are cornerstone species that are part of ecosystems that are, you know, doing important work for whatever reason, whether it be that the worms are moved around, that's helping the birds, etc. So it completely devastates the ecosystem. It completely destroys the nitrogen content in the soils when they're forced out. And it also means humans can't live in the right places where they're like, oh, this is a place where there aren't a bunch of groundhogs. They're going to destroy my house or my farm. I should move there. They're like, no, they're special there. So I forget what we were talking about just 2 seconds ago that led to me thinking about that.
I don't know. This is making me think of the what is it? Desertification.
I remember why. I wanted to really quickly say. So because the CDC is looking at humans the same way. So they're like, oh, okay, well, here's a healthy population of humans. And here's an area where there's just plenty of them. So let's go in there and we'll find like the humans that we can target. And we'll just
kind
test
of the
on
opposite.
That.
They're like, there's not that many people living rurally, and they're like, now no one's allowed to live rurally, and there's too many people in the cities, and they're like, everyone has to go there. So it's almost like the opposite of that.
Well, it's interesting also because we were talking yesterday about the Order of the Pug and Lincoln and JFK, and the more I look at the Pinkerton movement and what they did in the post-Civil War Reformation period, where they literally created puppet governments to take over the South, put soldiers on every corner under martial law for decades. Let me say American. They created these fake governments and they replaced all the local governments. What people don't realize is there were black governments at that time in Louisiana and Alabama and places. There were politicians and everything, and they replaced them and created a government that was completely controlled by the status quo. You know, any blacks that made it in the 1870s were Prince Hall Freemasons, right? So they were tied into the already existing status quo. And then the politicians that existed before that, the Arcadians, they were pushed out because they were associated with the Seminoles or with the Confederate tribes or anything like that. So this is actually an interesting period of racism in the United States because racism like this didn't exist before the Civil War. After the Civil War, it's
Right,
installed.
it's a totally different type of racism. Yeah, no, I follow that. Wow, yeah.
Right. It's crazy.
Largely economic, right? I mean, that's kind of the idea. And also, like, there's like a convenience factor. It's like you could look at somebody and just be like, oh, well, this is a slave, you know?
So, for one thing, Grant tried to remove all of the Jews in the South because a lot of the slave owners were Jews. And so Abraham Lincoln tried to stop him from doing that. And it took about a week. But there were a number of families that were pushed out that ended up moving into Mexico and Brazil as well. So there's a huge amount of anti-Semitism from the Yankees that and they consider, and there's a lot of papers where they talk about Confederate Jews, and they were trying to, they were completely upset at the Jewish Confederates. And so it's an interesting thing that's left out is how anti-Semitic they were, but also the fact that Lincoln was a Rothschild, likely, you know, there's a lot of
nobody show that link to Owen Benjamin, please.
Yeah.
So that's an ongoing debate, though, with the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. So people have married into Jewish families, but they're not neither of those are technically Jewish families. Is that correct?
The Rothschilds are, I believe. The Rockefellers are not. The Rockefellers are a House of Orange foundling line, kind of like the Carnegie was, right? There's a number of these guys who are foundling bastards, right? So they're still of the stock. And
right. It's just, if I go online
to the Spanish priests' sons and the altar boys, yeah.
Yeah, if I try and get down to the bottom of whether or not, I believe it's an issue too with the Rothschilds as well as the Rockefellers, how Jewish they are. The thing is that these people donate so much money to the state of Israel. And so do fundamentalist Christians as well. It's also, there's these ideas around Israel. And so whether or not they're Jewish, they definitely have a Zionist leaning to the max. True. So I think
they've said they're Jewish since the 15th
so
century.
Many people put their money in Switzerland and nobody calls them like Switzernist or anything like that.
Right.
Israel's a place. No, seriously, Israel's a place. Everybody right now is putting a lot of money. It's kind of like monkey see, monkey do. I would never say that the Rockefellers have anything to do. I mean, they're definitely not Semitic. Look at their facial features. And, you know, are they Ashkenazi? I mean, I don't think so. I don't think they're Jewish at all.
Right, but it's the ethno-state trip, and that's
true. Building Tibet and building Israel into new Zions have been parts of the occult goals for a long time. The idea of Tibet, right? And you can think about Israel, the way Israel is being fought over. What they want to do is the same thing with several holy cities, Astana as well. It's a city that belongs to the world, not to any one state. That is their idea, and that's an interesting idea because it kind of delegitimizes violence in that place. It makes it impossible to have violence unless the legitimate source of violence is the city itself. So it's the city state, but we're not sure if that's the case. I mean, look at Bosnia, Herzegovina. They're still fighting right now over the United Nations trying to build a state out of Bosnia Herzegovina, and Mostar is the Muslim capital. So you got a place where you got Catholics, Orthodox, and Muslims have been living for 1,000 years together, and it looked up until the 80s. It was like South Park. You know, you had the Jewish kid, the Muslim kid, the Christian kid. They were all hanging out together, laughing on the streets, trying to smoke a cigarette butt. And then, boom, we end up where they're blowing each other up because of things going on elsewhere. All of this propaganda that's being pushed in. So a lot of these ideas, like, oh wow, was this guy black or Italian? Or just like, dude, they were all living in the same place up until they created Central Park.
Dude, this is all in Heaven's Gate, by the way. The biggest flop in Hollywood history up to that point, you know. That's like the premise of Heaven's Gate is kind of showing what the mechanism is behind like the propaganda to get people to relate to, you know, the other, like the othering of the other.
It's the coolest movie ever, and I think they flopped it on purpose because, you know, they did so. First off, they actually took all the film before they made the movie and they exposed it to an ultraviolet emission for a brief moment so that there would be no true blacks in the whole film. And I mean, like, so that they would then shoot the whole film at magic hour and there would be no sunlight. So it's just this amazing color gradient that they did. And it totally pissed off the producers. They're like, why would you do that?
supposedly the original is over 5 hours long. And what we have now is like a 3-hour version, but the content, like what it's speaking to, like it makes me really wonder. I would be more interested in seeing the missing 2 hours of Heaven's Gate than I would the supposed missing 20 minutes of Eyes Wide Shut. And I have Kubrick tattooed on my arm, and I still say that because I'm like, what this film speaks to is like is so heavy hitting, and it's following Deer Hunter. So you had all these investors being like, oh, with the success of Deer Hunter, and it almost looks like they did almost like an anti-advertising campaign for a movie that was kind of like a modern Gone with the Wind or something. It's like it seems like they didn't actually want it to succeed. Like it was like, did the backers change their mind when they saw what it was really saying or something?
Right.
You know,
that's what, according from the documentary I saw on it, that's basically what happened.
Ooh, there's a documentary on it. I haven't seen that.
Well, it wasn't on itself. It was on a collection of cinematography projects and films, and it was like Light Magic or something. I'll find the doc for you. But there's a huge 20-minute section all about what happened with the making of the movie. By the way, it is Robert Anton Wilson's birthday. Happy birthday!
Happy birthday!
Birthday, Robert. Very cool.
God. Yeah, it's crazy, man. How long he's been dead is only he died in 2007, I think.
Dude, last night I get a call from Will Morgan saying, so I listened to Think Tank and I heard what you said about Robert Anton Wilson. And so, yes, Will made some good points. I would like to have Will on Think Tank at some point.
He's back next Tuesday. He was on yesterday while you weren't there. It was
really?
Hilarious. Yeah, and he was like,
no way.
Yeah, and Will jumped on and he's just like, I got my mic ready mainly because David said some stuff. And I had to come in here to debunk it because all of it was nonsense. And I was like, "This is going to be great."
Whatever." You know what's funny? He would say it that way because when we actually had a conversation before, I guess it wasn't last night. I guess it was the night before. But when we actually had a conversation, basically there's two different events. There's the Abram Mellon, the Mage working, which Robert Anton Wilson had done some degree of version of. I don't know how far he actually went with it. But that's the calling down of the Holy Guardian Angel. So he had this Holy Guardian Angel trip, but he also had an LSD experience from, I want to watch the fucking video, man. It's like, I'm going to send it to you. I don't know. But he explains his like experience with the puka thing. And I swear it's distinct from what Will was going off on. And I know what Will is referencing, and I think he's actually correct. But I think that he's also conflating two different things at the same time. And I didn't bother to qualify the distinction there. And I think I let them bleed into each other. And I did have some disinfo. I try to like, you know, after shows, like if go into the comments and like if there's something that I think of that I remembered myself saying in the course of a 2-3 hour conversation that I myself don't actually agree with, I'll correct myself.
Will, to be fair, Will's the kind of guy to be like, you were totally wrong. It was Shasta. It wasn't Cary County at all. You know, like that's exactly. He's like into the synchronicity of exactly which place or whatever. The fact is, Robert Anton Wilson's right here talking about a 6-foot-tall rabbit. You know what I mean? So It is what it is. Hangs out around pubs if you come out a pub at night. He's selling.
The video that I'm interested in that I'm referencing is the one when he says he saw something that said Mr. Wilson, but I don't think it was that he was actually watching Harvey because he says, I never heard of Harvey. And then I saw the reference and it said, hello, Mr. Wilson. And it blew my mind. Will was saying that was him watching the movie, which could be true. What's that?
It's a good play. Harvey, it's a play.
Yeah.
Oh, originally before Jimmy Stewart's thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. Well, you know, it's like it's
the Watership Down connection to Donnie Darko, and the fact that the puka is the Gaelic shadow rabbit spirit that's both a trickster and good and bad. You know, and the connections to the Egyptian magic that the Irish and the Scots had, the Gaels have through the Ferengi, the literal Frankish, you know, Ferengi from 1,000 years ago, not the Star Trek ones. So it's weird and interesting that this movie, and I've never seen it as a play, but I'd love to. We gotta go see some more plays, bro.
Live storytelling is its own experience. We're gonna bring it back. It's gonna happen. We'll go on tour.
I'm a big fan. I did want to point out that, like, Frederick Douglass is not the only leader, but we can get into that another time. There's more to that.
Who else? I mean, if you got a little bit more, that's very interesting. The period of time just after the Civil War. It seems like that kind of information could help a lot of people clear their minds a little bit. So
Sons of Confederate Veterans is a really great resource for this, actually, because they'll go into all kinds of amazing. I actually went to Louisiana and I went to an old plantation and I learned a lot about the South and Arcadia and what France and French culture had influence upon all of the Americas into Minnesota and Canada that eventually Louisiana purchased. We can think of Louisiana as a little tiny place. It wasn't. It was this much bigger thing than the 13 colonies that they swallowed up. And just the amount of culture that was erased and destroyed, and why, we think of Cajuns today as really dumb. That's kind of the idea. Is like he talks funny, or something like that. And that's what people think about Cajuns. They don't realize that it was the third largest economy in the world. Today, they report the South as the fourth largest economy because they only count cotton. In other words, with just cotton, they were the fourth largest economy. So when you think about the industry of the South, the fact that the South had Confederate submarines, for instance, right? And the kinds of technology during the friggin' war, they had airships and submarines. So the kinds of infrastructure that they were far more powerful.
They had submarines during the Civil War.
Yeah,
they had submarines in the Revolutionary War. There was a submarine attack in the I forget which harbor before 1776. I'm kind of fuzzy on the details right now, but
that's a smaller one, Revolution submarine. That's true, but it was a smaller boat that was, I don't know if I can find. Yeah, it
I think it was a sneak attack ordered by General Washington. I'm kind of fuzzy on the details right now, but
and they got that idea from the Dutch, and the Dutch got it from the Arabs, and the Arabs got it from Tartaria, and there are all sorts of stories.
Who got it from Jules Verne?
Well, Jules Verne. So Jules
Did you
Verne
get that thing? Look at that! Oh my gosh!
Jules Verne in Nantes got it from the Arabs and the Dutch because of he was studying in northwest France all sorts of Scandinavian literature, and that included the Normandy stuff. But so they did this. That's late. That's earlier. This is metal. You got a bunch of guys in here. They're pulling onto this bar that they're spinning, which is spinning the propeller. So they're all working together to spin the propeller. And it's moving the boat forward. Yeah. And eventually the Hunley gets trapped and is a bunch of men lost. And they found it in the 70s or 80s. And I got to see it in Louisiana. It's freaking amazing. Wow. And super sad, too, because you're like, these are kids and 15 to 17-year-old guys. And people always think about the South based on modern idiopolitical politics, but it's not about what we're told, right? It'd be like saying, I said this the other day, about slavery or anything else, because the Emancipation Proclamation didn't work on the United States. It only worked on rebelling states and in certain boundaries. So let's say you're in Alabama and you're a rebelling state, but you're just in the wrong boundary because they've actually made deals to keep your slaves in that area, because Lincoln didn't want to free slaves, and he says as much. So you wake up one day and there's just bullets raining on your home and your sister's dead and your neighbor's house is on fire. And you're 15 or 30, doesn't matter, or what, 50, you're going to have to defend your town. And, the kinds of people that were getting into these submarines are like, I'll do whatever it takes. Like, put me in an airship and put me up in the sky where, whatever it takes. So it's pretty crazy the time that went on. But then we live in a time today, which is a reflection of this. And it's kind of like, this is weird. Okay. So now I'm saying the opposite stuff, but I really strongly believe it. So I'm gonna go with it anyway, that we've instilled white supremacy into our culture, but it's not necessarily Euro or whatever it is. It's whatever we've created as this Babylonian culture. And it's destroyed the Northern Europeans. It's destroyed the Southern Mediterraneans. It's destroyed the Berbers. And it's also, America is responsible for that, because people come in, they destroy their culture, and then they pour it back out. Right. So I saw this documentary the other day called Music Theory White Supremacy. I went into that thinking, this is the dumbest thing ever.
No,
I'm gonna fight this. I'm gonna fight this so hard. And obviously, look at this guy. He's got to be wrong, right? I'm gonna use logical fallacies to win, whatever it takes. But then I started listening to him. I'm like, oh man, what if I did replace the term music theory with 19th century, 18th century European music? because what they've done is they've in other cultures, right? Like let's say we were to have learn music in India or something. They create a thing called a foil, right? Where you're like, okay, this is our music, this is their music. So American music or European music, they have these rules. Those rules are different than our rules. Here are their rules and our rules, and you can see them back and forth. And that way you understand like 16 different kinds of music. You understand African music, which requires you understand dancing, etc. But if you don't do that, and you just have the idea that there is one music theory, and it is music theory, and music theory is this, and it has to be that way, then you get stuck in this paradigm where you have no idea what other people think about music, and you can't even like other kinds of music or appreciate them. And we've done this on purpose for centuries.
Andreas, have you ever seen that instrument that combines both the Eastern and the Western? I don't know. I'm not a musician, so but my pain has been instrumental. No, but it takes both scales, I guess, and it like combines them in such a way. It's like I guess that was what was so like impressive about like what is it, Danny Carey from Tool, that he learned didn't just like incorporate tabla, but he was able to use tabla to work with Western music in such a way. Like there's like, that's like another level to it. I was at Rain Dance actually. Somebody did a demonstration with a stringed instrument that contained both the Eastern and the Western at the same time, and it was very strange. It was very strange music. I don't know what it was called.
It's interesting. So I looked a little bit into it and studied like the rags. Raga, I think, is another rag. So they have a way of looking at music, so like Sahani, and it has to do with weather and everything. But there's gliding. There's these gliding notes that you have to expect, and so they understand that in the West that there are gliding notes as well. So there's certain things that are similar, but there are also other things like, for instance, African music has polyrhythms, where German music focuses on landing on the beats. So they'll force you to study figured bass, which nobody needs figured bass unless they're doing Brahms or they're doing quartets or they're doing, something like that, which is great. And people should learn that if they want to do that, or they should know it exists, right? But if you spend all your school time learning figured bass instead of learning that there's like slapping bass or that there's glides or, different ways that people use instruments, or the other thing is the tritone thing. So everyone's been saying this and been kind of quiet about it because it's like, I don't think that's true. The musical tone thing, the tritone, you've heard this. Everyone's like, tritones are evil, right? And this is not true. Nobody ever did this, as far as I know, in history. The Catholic Church did not ban people for using the devil's notes. That's not true. We've all been told this. I've heard this
Where'd it come from? Where'd that come from?
Lars von Trier, Nymphomaniac. No, that was
it's a misnomer. So the thing is, I've actually found several old songs like Gregorian Christmas chants and things that are from France that use tritones. They're just not very popular because it's kind of hard to sing. A tritone would be like the example Pearl Jam, like meh, 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 meh. And when you do that, you can hear like it takes a second for my voice to get back to the right place. I'm not a trained musician, but it's harder and you can auto-tune it. But the people didn't want to do that. So tritones were just difficult notes. But it's also called
the devil because it's hard.
It's the devil because it's the devil because in Italian you would write diabolos, because it's like the dynamic.
Diabolos. I got you. Okay.
Yeah. And so people were like, "Oh, devil's note." That's what that meant. But there's no point in history where they were like, "You can't. You're not allowed." It's like, well, one does not. That's all musicians. Wow. Yeah. So it's weird. Like we've got all these.
Was it frowned upon? Is that the idea? It was like, well, it wasn't exactly banned that people would,
don't make people.
They're uncouth. You do not do the tritone in public. No.
I feel like that's the world we live in, doesn't it? Feel more like that world? I feel like that's the world.
Oh, sure, yeah. There's we are guided by hazy, vaporous social compulsion. Yeah.
But so I want to find a word for it because I started watching this documentary and I decided I agreed with everything except for the term white supremacy. Except even that, I could take it back and hear me out, right? Because Pink Floyd, not White Floyd, it's Pink Floyd, right? It's that.
Well, it's a blues musician, but yes.
But I mean, here's the deal: you've got black and white and everything, but then you've got the persons of color. You've got the entire spectrum that's happening, and then white in this is also representing fascism. because you're taking the bundle of photonics and combining them together to represent something that's drained of all of the different colors. It has nothing to
Right,
do
but
with
Andreas, you got to keep in mind that if you're looking at the sleeve of this record and you open the thing up, it goes back and around the whole thing and through. Because if you open up the record, then you can see the rainbow goes across. It's got the heartbeat in there, and it attaches back around. Dark Side of the Moon is actually a complete loop of, and then the two are in opposite directions, the two triangles. So you have really a star. You have a 6-pointed star, and it goes all the way through. Yeah.
Show me both. Like,
That's pretty
yeah,
cool.
they're a good
Right,
point.
and then it folds around. So that's the idea. Is you have you form it into a circle,
Oh my
and so
God, my new logo is the
that's
circle.
the album too with the heartbeat, because it begins and it ends with the heartbeat. Just like the wall ends with, at the very end of the wall, it says "This is where," really fast, and then when you start the album, it says "We come in," really fast. So it's like, "This is where we come in." Yeah. So it's
Right.
the loop thing.
And it's not even a perfect like balance. Like this is a positive is above. That's
I just want to say
interesting.
about the music theory thing. I mean, it's an interesting thing to think about, but I think that it's such a wrong takeaway to say it's white supremacy. I mean, really what they're talking about is how like our way of recording things or expressing things using language or any kind of notation is like, there's an infinite range of experience going on, and we're trying to communicate our experience to someone else. So we need some way to a shorthand, like some way to denote it. So like in Western music, where like there's 12 whole notes. In Chinese music, I think there's like 48 tones. So they're like counting steps in between the notes, like bends, like pitch bends in between the whole notes as their own notes. And, you know, things resolve, they have different resolves and stuff like that. And, you
Dude,
know,
I
but
wanted
it's
to hate
just a
this
matter
guy
of,
more.
if you're going to write it down, if you're going to be like, here's how to play the song, you have to have some way to write it down. And that's like, it's not implying that your way is better than the Chinese way. I mean, if there's any place on earth that likes listening to other people's music, it's America.
Like,
and also
I wanted
where
to hate
music
this
theory
guy.
comes from is Germany, and Germans weren't even white until like in the 1900s. Germans weren't even white. They're like, get these Germans are messing up our white blood, and Polacks and everybody who are like totally like considered to be sheet white today. But the real takeaway is that life is infinitely complex, and we're trying to understand it and explain what we understand to other people, and that requires compression. Basically, they're complaining about compression, but it's like, we're doing our best. You know what I mean? But like, you got to compress infinity a little bit to try to explain something to someone else. You know,
I'm actually pretty convinced that Beethoven was partially black. I think there's enough evidence for that. And then there's also, it doesn't matter because there's Joseph Boulogne, the black.
Don't say that to Owen Benjamin either.
I know we wouldn't hate it, but there are a lot of people in Europe at the time, because like you have to understand, the Portuguese and the Arabs were all working through Spain and come into Holland, and so there were a lot of people that were partially black. I mean, you look at the Russians, and you've got Pushkin, and you've got all these writers. You have the black writer block, so it's not unusual in Europe to have black aristocrats. And there were great, for instance, Joseph Cologne, who was Chevalier de Saint George or whatever. He was like the greatest composer. I like his music way better than Mozart's, and Mozart wasn't even nearly as popular at the time as Chevalier was. So there were black composers, obviously, and it looks like some of them may have been whitewashed. And this guy annoys the hell out of me, and everything he says is clearly wrong. And his idea of why people believe what they do is wrong. I agree with all of that. I think he's out of control. But this kid, he might have found some interesting point. And getting into what you just said about Germans, right? So the music theory books that are really popular, like Harmony and Voice Leading, which is used today. Schenker's book talks all about this idea of this Schenker music theory, where you have down notes, but he was a religious Viennese Jewish anti-Semite. So he was during the 30s in Germany, in Austria, when the Nazis were coming to power, and he was Jewish, and he was vehemently against the Jews because he was trying to maintain this Viennese cultural supremacy. And so he demanded that this music was music, that all other music was not music, because it was not objectively following the rules of true music theory. So it's not that this is Western music theory or white music theory or whatever. It's just this objectivity that everything else is not.
I mean, what we're calling music theory right now, Chinese people have music theory, and they have a Chinese word for it, and it's different. Like, it's not like they don't have a way to write down their music. They do, but it's just.
But you don't hear about that in music school at all. And the fact that
you do in China, I mean, in China, that's all you hear about, probably. You know, so.
No, in China, they teach you about Western music theory too.
These people have these are the myopic people, the people that are we're in a state of progression and they're unsatisfied with it, so they call it white supremacy. That's the myopathy right there. Like, the truth of the matter is, like, reggae is like a perfect example, right? Like, first of all, you've got like drums with a downbeat. That's African. There's no drums like that, and like chamber music. Then you've got Irish guitar. It's like a blend of like African and all different styles of European music and instruments from around the world. And now there's like reggae theory and like a very cookie cutter way to make reggae music, but it's just a state of progression. We've already combined all these different forms of music, and now that gets stale and people write it down one way and think about it one way, but we're constantly progressing. I mean, music is the ultimate melting pot, and it keeps getting more and more complex.
Old Yankee joke. Thank you, Stefan. Confederate Army tech engineering was so haphazardly assembled and half cooked that their subs had hand cranks and screen doors. Oh yeah. Right, the submarines.
I've heard that joke. Yeah.
Screen doors. That's a Polish joke.
I thought they were blondes, but yeah, exactly. I mean, that gets right back to my point, I guess. Reggae music theory is important. I agree with you. I think my only problem is that for the last 100, 200 years, people have said, well, that's not music, about just about everything. They're like, oh, well, rap's not music because it doesn't, like Ben Shapiro says rap's not music because it doesn't have some quality to it, right? Like, it doesn't have a certain kind of melody or something. I forget what he doesn't, even though a lot of it does.
That's insane. I mean, with samples makes everything infinitely more complex because you can sample Chinese music, Indian music, chamber music, and you can put it all together into a hip hop beat. I mean,
but Ben Shapiro saying Ben Shapiro saying rap is not music is the same as a Chinese person saying that African music's not music, or an African person saying that American
Ben Shapiro's not a human is what they might not say. They're like, oh, we're human. That's an animal.
Right. Yeah.
He just likes, isn't he one of those people that mainly like it hits or hits? Like, it doesn't really matter. Like, and whatever, you know, like, I don't think he really cares. Yeah. True. Yeah, I don't know how.
But I see what they're saying about with this video. They're like, we in our quest to be able to communicate how to play music, like the compression is now what's writing the music. Like, we have this compression algorithm to explain what we hear and write it down so other people can replicate it. And now people are using that instead of the infinite range of possibility that inspired the music in the first place.
And for the most part, people ignore it, right? So real music's made by people who don't study music theory. We love to listen to music made by real musicians all the time that aren't trained like to forget what they are. But also, it's a scarier thing to me because this is, I think, the marriage between the left and the right spheres. And this isn't just about music. This is about everything. This is the way we're looking at things. We're saying that this hegemony, this cultural top-down thing, and so the left are calling it the white. I'm calling it Babylon. You can call it something else, maybe the reptilians. I don't mind. But there's a thing that's telling every person on this earth or whatever how to be. And they're saying, okay, this isn't a cultural subjective idea. This is objectively the truth. This is a religious fact. Music is this way. Truth is this way. Your
art is this way. Yeah.
Politics should be feelings, empathy, health, right? Mental health, physical, all these things. And I just see it as I don't know. I feel like they're connected ideas.
I think there's overwhelming evidence to see a through line to a monolithic style imposition of this kind of constrictive thinking and existing in modern day. However, here we are right now laughing in its face. So how much longer can the WEF and friends try to squeeze us into this box that we don't fit in and we're going to break out of the moment that we get the chance to?
We aren't the only ones, I guess.
You know, what's so ironic is making a video like music theory is white supremacy is what they would call white supremacy, which is following a formula. Like, they're following a formula of how to make a successful YouTube video by calling a thing.
Dude, it always comes through the back door. As soon as it's like that,
white supremacy, if that's what it means.
Yeah, this blonde, blue-eyed kid making this video, I was like, God, I wish I had eyes like that. Are you kidding me?
You know, it's like language is the craziest thing, right? Like, just experiencing reality, which is an infinite shades and tones and everything. And then you try to make words to explain it, and it's like super compression, like you lose all the resolution of reality, but that's the only way to communicate with each other. And then people get frustrated with that, and it's like, be patient, you know what I mean? Like, things change constantly. If you don't like white supremacy, just wait, it's going to change, you know.
hey, can you fact check this? Wasn't the kid who was on all the posters for, like, there was like one, like the perfect Aryan child that was like all over Poland or whatever, and then it turned out in the future that the baby was Jewish?
Probably.
Do you know this thing?
I mean,
It
this
was
happens
like,
a lot because Jews a lot of times are blonde and blue-eyed or redheads, and like it's not, this idea or not. They could also be black. I remember being in a bar in Peru, and there were Israelis that were Ethiopian Israelis and Ashkenazi Israelis and Sephardic Israelis, and the Sephardic Israelis like worked the bar. The Ashkenazi sat on one side of the bar, and the Ethiopian sat on the far, and they did not interact. They did not like each other.
Dude,
so weird.
Yeah, so I hate 23andMe shit. I hate that people turning over their DNA and all like that whole trip feels very dystopian Philip K. Dick to me. And I will say that phenomenon where somebody has okay, Rose showed up last night. I was hanging out with
Nice.
Rose.
Shout out to
And
Rose.
I somebody connected to her. I don't know if it was her family member or her friends, whatever. It was somebody related to her that was was all about how Italian he is. And he's like, I'm 100% Italian. It's like his whole life.
Italian.
All the time with the freaking I'm 100% Italian bit. And then another relative did the 23andMe thing.
Oh, no.
Both same parents. And this person particularly had it was Turkish people they had an issue with. And it was Mexicans, and they had both. And the amount of, I believe it was Turkish.
Why do you think you get issues with random people? Why would you pick Turks and Mexicans?
But for somebody to come at the world with this idea, the identity thing, where do you derive your identity? Who is it that makes you? What your ancestors did? What you're doing? What, you know what I mean? Your skin tone? What the hell? So anyway, it's just so superficial. But I gotta say, if that's on one of those shows where they're oh, it turns out you're, I like that. I like to see people have to go through heavy processing around that.
Yeah.
They're like, no, what? The thing that you have a charge on. And I think that happens in general with people beyond race, just to have charges on certain things, and then the nature of the shadow and such that, hey, actually, this is something that is actually a part of you. And that, I like that. I gotta say, because yeah.
Well, you can only hate parts of yourself because you can only be aware of yourself. I don't know.
I love that shadow work point you just made, or the shadow comment that you just made, because getting that knowledge, understanding that there's that charge there for whatever reason, is an opportunity for massive growth.
Right.
To recognize all of the varied aspects of yourself, to come to grips with, and then understand the value of your magnificent mosaic self and your gene. I love the idea.
Did you ever notice that in Full Metal Jacket, you don't see the enemy except in shadow until the very end when the sniper turns out to be a woman and there's basically a symbolic gangbang or whatever? But that's when he's like, why do you have the peace button? And it says born to kill on your helmet. And he says, it's the Jungian thing. And he says, you better pull your head out of your ass or whatever. But he's saying, it's duality of man. But that's I'm just saying, what we're talking about is communicated in that, because you have to relate to the enemy in such a way that they are in shadow. It can't be the thing itself, because if it's a thing itself, then you're going to have humanity, and you're not going to be able to relating to getting a kill as the equivalent of getting laid, which they want the Marines to do. And so, yeah, anyway, the same.
Great point. Yeah, that you must dehumanize the enemy. Otherwise, they're not the enemy. They're another human.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. People will shoot in the other direction or over their heads or whatever, because that's the motivation?
What the evil guy is. It's the monopoly guy. It's not white supremacy or Babylon or reptiles. It's the monopoly.
Isn't this a Mandela effect with his monocle? That everyone says he had a monocle and he didn't have a monocle.
He didn't? Who had the monocle? Was the Peanut?
Mr. Peanut.
Mr.
Peanut had the monocle. But so did what? Yeah. No, Mr. Monopoly had a monocle. What are you talking about? Well,
not in this timeline. In this timeline, there's no monocle.
Right. I will exist in this
liminal space. Fruit of the Loom had no cornucopia or whatever.
Right. So we'll have the monocle guy be the Illuminati guy. But I think that's the thing, is that there is this sort of monolithic character, and it's like Boss Smiley, because I like the idea of the reptilian, because the idea of removing the humanity from it, because it's it isn't just one group of people. It's a part of all humanity. So I don't know.
Somebody's trying to call me out. I'd say rewatch Full Metal Jacket, because they're saying they show the enemy several times. No, they show them dead. So they'll be hanging out with them dead, or they'll be running around in the dark, and you can't completely make them out. So they're removed. The Viet Cong are removed from your line of vision, unless they're dead. But yeah, I just wanted to speak to that. Sorry.
Oh my god.
Is there a case like to not have like the reptilian archetype or the monocled villain or anything? Is there an example anywhere in history of like a hands-off elite, like people who just gather all the resources and power and then just decide to do nothing and just let people live as they will and just
all the
Good question.
all the Athenian and Egyptian stories kind of talk about the gods doing that, right? They're like, and so people kind of suggest it's like aliens or some sort of a hyper advanced civilization that's separated so that they just watch us like an ant colony.
I definitely have a theory on that. I think those are technocrats. Like I think the Greek pantheon of God are technocrats.
Absolutely, yeah, and that I think that's fair. The Prez comic goes on to that Boss Smiley idea, which is like he's the first teen president. I don't know if you ever read this comic, but it's fascinating. I love Prez. Prez is one of my favorite comic series, and so the first teenage president, he becomes president with the help of Boss Smiley. Sort of, Boss Smiley realizes he needs him to be president. But then Prez refuses to do any of the things Boss Smiley asks of him and tries to make America a better place. And I think he gets assassinated, but he's constantly going and fighting against.
This is a DC comic?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Wow.
Boss
2016?
Well, they have it in the 80s, 70s, and 80s too. Like this is the original Boss
Oh,
Smiley.
no wonder you love it. It's got your smiley face thing.
I don't even remember Boss Smiley, but I was a Marvel kid.
God, yeah, I don't know. I like Vertigo and Icon and
I was a Dark Horse kid myself.
Dark Horse, you know. But yeah, DC. I like DC stuff because DC bought a lot of stuff I like Shazam, because I had like my dad's old comic books. Because when he was a kid in the 50s, man, comic books, dude. Shazam, 1950. Would they cancel it or did they reprint it? Yeah, they still did it. Because like you remember, Shazam was like they said it was a ripoff of Superman. And so then they destroyed it, and then they bought it, and now they make it.
Isn't that the name of the other Mandela effect with who did they? Sinbad being in playing a genie.
Shaq being Kazam, they have Sinbad.
I think I may have gotten to the. I think I may have figured that one out, and I don't know how the wires got crossed because Sinbad was in a like Sinbad the Sailor marathon that they did heavy advertising for, and it only aired once, you know, but it was like a big
also,
thing
he
at one
dressed
point
like
in the
a
90s.
Genie every time he did stand-up comedy.
And he dressed like a genie for the Sinbad the Sailor thing. Did he actually wear the genie hat when he did stand-up? I don't know about it. No,
but he
because
wore like bright color silk pants and stuff like that with tight ankles. Like MC Hammer. He dressed like MC Hammer.
The fact that they don't have a more of a Sinbad like story that's bigger kind of also tells you something about this timeline. I don't know if it's a Mandela effect or not, but the Barbary Wars, the idea of Sinbad sailing the seven seas, why is this not a much more famous, you know, we don't have this as an American.
Is it public domain?
I feel like it should be.
If it is, let's take it over. Let's do it. Let's start to Sinbad the New Chronicles.
Dude, it has to be, right? Come on. Sinbad the Sailor has to be public domain, right?
I mean, that talk about an awesome opportunity if it is.
Right.
Yeah, he's from Arabic folklore, so he has to be from the 8th century. Yeah, like there's no way he's not.
What are you gonna do? Yeah, totally.
That's pretty.
Yeah.
Cool.
What was the thing in Seventh Voyage where it's like from the land beyond in a world past hope and fear, I bid you, genie, now appear. That's what you have to say while you're rubbing the lamp to get the genie out or whatever. And then Bugs Bunny had his own version of it that ended with flippity floppity floop.
The one I'm not ready to cornucopia. The one I'm not ready to get rid of in my mind is the cornucopia, fruit of the loom.
I remembered that. No, that was there.
Anybody have a way to describe like what is? Because like I know Tim doesn't.
I'm pretty sure it was just a pile of fruit, and then people when they see a pile of different fruits, they add in the cornucopia in their mind because that's just like.
How could everybody do that? How could we all do that? There must be like at least give me something. Was there like a?
But I didn't do it as a thing. You know, I don't think we all did do it. I think once we hear it suggested, that's like an archetype, like a pile of fruit coming out of a cornucopia.
No, man. I mean, okay, so for me, it's like I resolutely.
What about the commercial where the guys are dressed as giant grapes and giant strawberries and stuff? Where's the cornucopia?
The cornucopia is not a character. The whole of the screen is the cornucopia.
No, they're just in a white background. There's a guy dressed as a grape and a guy dressed as an apple.
I know. The only thing,
I
my personal experience is I had Fruit of the Loom underwear when I was a little kid, and the tag was itchy as shit, and it had a cornucopia on it. That's how I remember it. That's how I was like, okay, I hate this tag. I hate this underwear. Get this.
The Berenstain Bears one.
Tried to call that memory back. Like, what was the situation? Like, did someone bring it up, or like?
No, I can recall
someone asked me, like, was it a Fruit of the Loom? What do you remember about the Fruit of the Loom logo? And I'm like, Fruit of the Loom logo, the cornucopia with fruit in it, and they're just like, yep, no, not anymore. I was like, really? Okay,
right.
So for me, it's like there's no question, like, in my mind that I remember it with the cornucopia. Like,
they never said, "Beam me up, Scotty." He never said, "What if I told you?" in the Matrix. The Berenstain Bears one, like, I remember when I was in like 3rd grade with Berenstain Bears, and I remember thinking to myself, or even saying out loud, that it didn't look the way it sounded. And I was like, why do we pronounce it this way when if I try and sound out the letters, it sounds this way? And so that's one of the ones that I'm like, I feel like I had an issue with that when I was a kid. So that would make sense, because everyone said it the way they said it. And then you're like, you see it in your mind as though that were the way that it was written, but it wasn't.
I feel 99% confident that all the Mandela effects can be explained, and that, like, people miss the more interesting point, is that, like, how reliable is history or any of our memory? Because once people, there are archetypical ways things are, we think things are supposed to be. So just when somebody asks you, think of the Fruit of the Loom, you know, you picture the fruits in the cornucopia, because when you're a kid in school, every time it's Thanksgiving, there's always so many images of a cornucopia with fruits coming out of it on the table, you know, and stuff like that. So your brain just puts it pieces together. Another great example is,
I agree with that.
Can I quickly do my favorite example? My favorite example, I'm going to do it. My favorite example is Luke, I am your father. In Return of the Jedi, the line that precedes that is, he goes, "You're a monster."
Empire
Darth
Strikes Back.
Vader says, "No, I'm your father." He's contradicting Luke, saying, "You're a monster." In the commercials, they do a smash cut where they cut together scenes quickly and and then string audio behind it. And so they cut together because you weren't even going to really understand who the participants in the conversation were. Things were going fast. So they cut in Luke, "I am your father," for the purpose of the commercial, while they're showing Darth Vader holding his hand out. Then you saw that commercial 100 times and only saw the movie 2 or 3 times. So it's
right, there you go. Right, same thing with Forrest Gump with life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Life is like a box of chocolates. What does he actually say now?
Life is a box of chocolates, something like that.
Mom always said, life is like a box of chocolates.
Another great example is Bowman in 2001. In the commercials, he said, "Oh my God, it's full of stars," and in the movie, he never said.
No,
it.
he says that in 2010, the year we made contact. They also have it in an advertisement? I didn't know that.
It is never in a movie.
It's in 2010, the year we made contact. I bet you $1,000.
Okay,
that is
all right.
confidence.
Maybe I have that one wrong.
What's the line?
Oh my God, it's full of stars.
Oh my gosh, what?
Oh my God, it's full of stars.
It's full of stars. Let's see if we can find the scene. The year we made contact. Is it right here? Would it be in the intro?
Yeah.
It would be in the commercial, 1,000%.
Somewhere in here, and then it'll say his last words. It'll say his last words were, "Oh my God, it's full of stars."
My God, it's full of stars.
Oh my God, it's full of stars.
Yeah, right there.
But where's the line? Where's him saying it out loud? In the commercial, he said it out loud.
Oh, did he say it out loud? Yeah, no.
Yeah, in the commercial, he's saying it out loud. Oh my God, it's full of stars.
Well, he may actually say it at the end of the movie, though. I have to check.
I waited because I watched the movie and I waited the whole time for that. Because I was a little kid, so I'd see the commercial. I'd be like, "That's the part I'm waiting for." Oh my God, it's full of stars.
Right.
We watched the whole movie and it never happened, and I was like, "What?"
1968. Came out in 1968. How old are you?
I'm 46.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're talking about 2010, the year we made contact, and you're probably right that he may say it out loud in the commercial, and then in the movie he didn't freaking say it. You probably are right about that. But they do write it.
It's 2010. Then obviously I wasn't alive for 2001.
No, it's so tricky to fucking keep track of shit from your childhood too. My God. Yeah. And then you're like holding to it. So my question to anybody with the fucking Empire Strikes Back thing that you're pointing out is like, I'm immediately like, what were the other lines that surrounded it? Recite it for me. If you're that confident that that you know that he said it this way. What's everything else? Because I have it memorized. I have the script signed by the producers, you know. But I'm like, dude, that's always my thing. I'm like,
is it you're a monster, right? You're
says,
a monster. No, Luke, I'm your father. Is that right?
He says you told me that no, that's to Obi-Wan. What does he say? I'm sorry, I'm talking myself up only because I've done it so many times. But he goes, oh, he told me enough. He told me you killed him. And then he says, no, I am your father. And people remember it saying Luke, including James Earl Jones himself. James Earl Jones himself was asked it, and he remembered it differently. So it's like, dude, the guy who said the line,
he might have recorded it several ways because again, he recorded
the commercial. Maybe we can find the commercial for Return of the Jedi where he says, "No, Luke, I am your father."
I mean, I remember that. I know I've seen that commercial though because when they did the video cassette release, so I know that's a thing.
You know what a smash cut is for commercials where they're cutting together the scene.
You can't get like a 6-minute scene into 30 seconds otherwise.
You're cutting things together, and then you have to tell the story in 5 seconds, which is Luke, I am your father. It can't just be no, I am your father, because it's like who are you talking to? You know.
Right. Yeah. There was like a short documentary type thing on Forrest Gump that had it said the way that we remember it. That's different than if you watch it now. Apparently, the VHS still has it the same way that the digital does. But I think the only way to know for sure would be to look at the freaking reel that was used when it was played in the theaters to really know what was said.
There could be different versions of the theater reels too. There could be different theater copies that are different. That's not a
right.
I know there's like 6 versions of every video I've ever had. You know, like there's always a director's cut, the TV cut, like the different.
What if they were doing that all the time just to be dicks, like putting out different versions so people argue about it?
They kind of are, I think.
I
don't think that's exactly the thing, but it is interesting that we've got so many people at the time that they're pulling down statues and erasing books. Saying that they can't remember things the way that they
right. Who Framed Roger Rabbit is much different. The baby in Who Framed Roger Rabbit was way raunchier in the theater than when it came out on video. So they made it more child friendly with his cigar stuff and everything. And him, you know.
The most effective way to destroy people to deny and obliterate their own understanding of their history, said George Orwell. So I mean, it seems like a thing that would be useful if you were trying to social engineer a populace into a new state, like a new kind of civilization.
But the hardest way to go about it would by smashing atoms together to access different timelines. That wouldn't be the smoothest way to go about that. You know,
no, absolutely. Yeah, you just dub over video cassettes. Right. Yeah.
Right. Well, there's always something to be said, like with the flat Earth thing as well, for like, you know, to get people to question the most basic things. So if we can't even agree on the fundamentals, it's like a lot of things just steered towards making it harder and harder for people to organize, because we can it's fragmentation, so we can disagree on more and more issues, so you can't organize. That's one of the difficulties of the left, is that people tend to be individuated in certain ways that they're not going to align, because what one person thinks is the core issue, the next person who they should be on the same page with, given their values or whatever, can't seem to align. You end up fighting. You have so much infighting.
All of these flat Earth things look like globes anyway. This is just sort of an inside out, you know, Koresh teed firmament egg kind of globe. But I still see, you know, something going on with that firmament, right? And you got so the Yggdrasil seems to be kind of hitting the ceiling there. So it's I don't know if flat is exactly the word for it, but that is the way they used to draw the world, right? Like the history of world. Flat Earth.
Well, a puddle is flat. It's possible that it's a huge round Earth, and what we call the Earth of the UN map is a flat puddle on the, you know, relatively flat puddle on a giant globe. But
it is funny. Like you look at this map, right, and you can see like every single map is basically the same map. You've got this flat Earth with this firmament, turtle, snake, flat Earth, firmament, elephants, fancy version of the same thing. And, you know, up until you get, you know, then you get here, you know, this is what we get now. Zoom in a bit too.
Right, but I know in Hebrew the word that's used for world is also like land, like it's like a mass, like it doesn't necessitate they're talking about the planet Earth if you just use the same word. So like they're like the whole Earth was covered in water for 40 days or something. It's like, no, everywhere you looked was covered in water from the people who wrote this down. You know what I mean? It's like
if we're being serious, it's not the whole world. We couldn't tell. This is everything we saw. That's all. All right.
Well, no mention of Asia ever. So
you've heard my rant about whales recently. Mind you,
I saw a crazy picture of a whale's fin that was just the bones, but like fresh. It looked like a hand. It literally looked
right,
like
right,
a
totally.
grippy. So yeah, just to a little bit to your point.
Yeah, phalange looking thing.
There you go. There was one right there. Go back. All right, look, yeah, see? So, I mean, here you go. Here's a giant with another human. You know what I mean? And how is this possible? What does this mean? Blah, 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 blah. I kind of think that the water vapor canopy thing is the one that makes the most sense to me right now. And the idea that the air and the water were H3O, and if you saw that movie, whoa, calm down, microphone, don't fall over. The Abyss.
Oh, yeah.
And they make them breathe this stuff. Was it Abyss H3O? Is that what it's called? I forget. But I remember hearing about it.
Amniotic fluid. They had them. Yeah, it was like existing in the womb again. Yeah.
I wish I could spell
oxygen-rich goo.
Oh, I did it right. Okay. How come the Abyss movie Fluid isn't coming up? You'd think that. There we go.
There we go.
No, there is. I didn't think that we were going to talk about this, but I could find some papers on this. There really is this stuff. And I've seen, actually, I think if you type in on YouTube, I saw a guy, like maybe scientists did this, and they said that the soldiers, the SEALs that they tested it on, it felt like they were drowning for like an hour or something like that.
God.
But then they were able to breathe this way, and they kept them that way for like a week. So there's some crazy stuff going on with amniotic fluids.
Wow.
What about that super soldier on Project Camelot who was basically like a human dolphin hybrid who could go through stargates and shit underwater?
I mean, they make him a character in that new Inside Job show. But
dude, I'm sorry, that tripped me out. Like when I watched that guy, I don't know if you know which guy I'm talking about. He keeps like looking to the side. I don't know what the hell. Project Camelot had some weird interviews, but he talked about this. So it was like there was an incident that happened off the coast of Yemen involving pirates, I believe, or whatever. And it was in the news a number of years ago. It was like 2014 or 13 or maybe even before. And there he is. And it was like we went on. Me and my friend Evan, you might know Evan Gardner, Andreas. We were looking up Yemen from Google Maps, like the most recent thing, and we zoomed in and you could see the warships. So there's like all these ships from different nations, even from China, who like very rarely sent anything out. And they were like encircling this spot, and it was like totally like smoke or mist that they were circled around, and you couldn't see what was down there. But this guy was claiming that it was like basically a portal, and that like they were guarding it dealing with this thing that was happening off the coast of Yemen. But it was really
space
trippy.
Is on a vacuum is the point.
Right, so
space
like
is basically amniotic fluid.
The experience of like watching this at the time, whatever year when that was first uploaded, was like we were watching it and we're like, let's look it up. What's happening off the coast of Yemen? There's supposed to be something really big there, and then we could see it. And so I don't know beyond that if that just because he says that that's what this is, but whatever the case was, it was really strange.
There's been some interesting things talking about water in space. NASA has talked about water in space over and over again, and the way they talk about it is like, well, but it's just very distant. It's so big that it's spread out. So it's like plasmic water. It's H2O, but there's actually other things in it as well. But it's not all mixed together. So in other words, you have this vaporous cloud that is not a vacuum. And time and time again pointing out that it's not a perfect vacuum, that our vacuums are hundreds of times higher pressure than the vacuums of space, right? Because it's not a freaking vacuum. And all this stuff that's floating around in space, kind of whatever that means, that's real stuff. That's actual, like, it's so if the Earth at one point and space had more of they're less of a dynamic and they were more of a singularity, like there was more of a vaporous atmosphere on Earth, then that would change a lot about what can grow here. And we've talked about silicon trees and how they could grow in a vaporous environment because they'd have constant access. This is how aquaponics and vaporponics work.
Yeah, aquaponics and aeroponics work just like this. Absolutely. Aeroponics more so.
Aeroponics, right? There we go. Aeroponics. But imagine then giants. I think that this would make more sense. We're living in a time when the sea and the land, the sea and the air were one thing. What do you think of that?
It's very reminiscent of what some say about the Earth's prehistory sitting in the envelope of Jupiter or Saturn, that there was this twilight water canopy vapor thing that just encapsulated us or the planet. and you had massive species walking around because they were supported by such an interesting and unique environment, or maybe not so unique. Who knows?
I mean, they talk about the classical elements like earth, water, air, fire, ether, right? So
Right, but Earth is usually considered a composite of the other three, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something like that.
But then what is ether?
What is it? Yeah, that's a good question.
Because Earth is maybe ether is plasma and a composite of the other three as well.
You know,
Maybe.
the word mana, whatever. The literal meaning of that is what is it? It's literally a question. Like you don't know what it is. So that's kind of weird.
I'd like to play two. What is it, please? Two. What is it? And I'm going to tap a land.
God, actually, I want to see if we can find that like breathing liquid.
Is that the Matrix? What was happening? Like he pulls the thing out of his throat, and he was like, I don't know, this liquid comes out or whatever.
They did it, man. It just seems like horrible because, like, you know, you get emphysema probably because you have stuff in your lungs.
Liquefy the dead to feed the living.
God, I don't know. So I mean,
really good with liquid in general.
I mean,
Dude,
I don't know.
I totally thought when you said Abyss, you're going to be talking about the movie from the 80s or 90s or whatever. Abyss.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to talk about.
Yeah, that's what he was referencing. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you
Ed Harris. Great.
Was it 1991, 96? When is that movie? 96?
No, I think
89.
89, 90?
Right. No, it had to be 89. Okay, so
I saw it in the
theaters.
theaters. I love that movie.
Oh, that's cool.
It was a super great Tavistock worldwide premiere, right? And the idea was that the Soviet Union was about to collapse, and this was one of the final anti-Cold War movies talking for unification of the New World Order. And they're saying, look, aliens have come, and they're finally just like, this is ridiculous. We've been here before, and we come back, and we're just going to reset it and wait because your civilization hasn't progressed enough. And like, oh, but we're right on the edge. We can totally do it. Like, no, I mean, look what you guys are doing here. Like it's 1990, it's almost 1990, and you're still no, it's not going to happen. And so that's the basic plot of the movie.
Plus, this is right before the Soviet Union fell too, probably just a couple months later.
Right, it fell literally like while this was happening, but it was pretty obvious it was falling. So I think that this movie must have been like
not at the time. At the time, all the Sovietologists were predicting it was going to be around for hundreds of years.
In 1989,
nobody predicted the fall of the Soviet Union. That's like one of the most famous media blunders of all time.
Clearly, Gorbachev was intimidated by Star Wars potential, and as soon as Reagan said "tear down this wall," he was really intimidated, and so he had to do the obvious thing.
I mean, people were talking about will the Soviet Union survive until 1984? I remember. I mean, around Europe
until 1984. It dissolved in 1990.
Yeah, I mean, but
I see what you're saying.
I'm saying in the 70s, people were already talking about it. If you go to Yugoslavia, you get a lot of people that are like, "Come on, like you can't have a Soviet Union forever because
it was around for 70 years. I mean, and
but it became a federalist government. Like it was supposed to be a European Union, and so that's why a lot of Yugoslavia was decidedly removed from the Soviet Union. So they were saying, "Hey, we don't need you. We could have a socialist economy in Europe. We could start to encourage the Northern Europeans to join with us," which they did. And also with the Arab bloc, right? Because they were presenting sponsored scholarships to go to Zagreb or to Belgrade for educations if you were from the Arab Emirates or all these places. So they were really, they'd built, it was kind of like the Bolivia of Europe, in a lot of ways. And the Soviet Union was kind of predicted as a problem because they couldn't keep control of Czechoslovakia in 1968. So I can see why in 1970 they'd say, okay,
right. Isn't that the unbearable lightness of being? Isn't that what that's?
Yeah, I mean, that's about like I say, it's also about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. But so is the Czech experience, really.
Right, but is it that period? I can't remember.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, okay. I'd recommend if you look into the Velvet Revolution, which is the term for the Czech uprising, but also what's useful is watching Two Wild and Crazy Guys. Because and if you want like any context, because I used to watch Saturday Night Live as a kid and I had no idea what the hell was going on like half the time, but then it's like Monty Python. Then you read about what's going on in the newspapers that week and like, oh, I get it, because in Britain so Two Wild and Crazy Guys, all of a sudden these guys show up from Czechoslovakia and they're two wild and crazy guys. And you're like, why? Well, because that's what in the Czech Republic they had LSD. They had acid, they had parties, they had crazy fun. And it was like this, they were the engineering sector for the Soviet Union. You had all these states for different reasons, the Silicon Valley, at that time. So they were allowed to do a lot of fun stuff. And then a lot of the guys were working on agricultural degrees, like socialist automation, so that people wouldn't have to work anymore. There'd just be food for everybody. They were doing all kinds of, like, there was a lot of crazy stuff that was going on. And the Soviet Union from Russia just shut it down. They came in 1 week and then people were freaking out. They're like, you can't just do this. You can't, these are our children. You know what I mean? And some of these kids are like 24, 26, and because they have an 8-year degree in socialist agriculture or in socialist ideology or something to fix the future. Like, doesn't matter. We don't call that socialist agriculture anymore. We call that friggin' heresy. We call that treason. And they're like, well, you can't just kill our kids. And they're like, all right, well, we're going to drive our tanks on the trains slow. You got about 2 weeks or maybe a week. Get you 10 days. Get out of the country. And they left the borders open. And then they just let all the Czechs who wanted to get out of the country, say goodbye to their families, leave all their stuff behind. And if they could, they got into Canada, or they got into Venezuela, or they got into England or Ireland. They smuggled into Germany. But when you could, you got, went to New York City, right? And so that's what the two wild and crazy guys represent. They represent these refugee diaspora Czechs who had watched their families taken from them and their cousins and things. Like at this point, the people that stayed behind in the Czech Republic, if you were still into this stuff, self-immolation became really common.
Wow. People
started just burning themselves in the streets in the Czech Republic because they were like, wow, it's like, well, so I do. So it's interesting because we compare that to the Vietnam War also, and just kind of the amount of dedication that they had to their world that was taken from them. People don't understand like how crazy.
Right, but the Vietnam War really did a interesting propaganda way to so like that gunshot, that everybody saw, that was the most violent thing ever shown on television, to the best of my knowledge, that was real, that people saw. And like that, like to watch something, to the power of television at that time, like to see that so directly. And then it was like, who's the oppressor? Who's the oppressed? We got to stop this oppressor. And it was an isolated incident that was terrible, but like that became a symbol,
Isolated incident, right? Isolated next to Cambodia, and isolated next to Laos, and isolated next to
not isolated in that sense, just in terms of the camera frame, that you're the boots stomping on the head and then the hand is in there. Not that that's what that was, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, like,
simultaneously
bigger picture.
Not quite simultaneously with the end of the Vietnam War and into 1980s, you had the Afghan conflict with the Soviet Union, where they went into the Afghanistan mountains, and that's why the CIA started working with the Al Qaeda. And Al Qaeda up to that point, Qutb in Egypt had been on the outs, but they had trained him in the sense that they had tortured him. And they'd use the CIA torture manual. So they knew that. But then the CIA actually picked them up and started like providing them with weapons. And the John Birch Society,
Stinger missiles. Yeah.
The John Birch Society actually set them up to take weapons that they wanted the Soviet Union to acquire in certain circumstances as well, because they knew that if the Soviet Union fell too far behind, they wouldn't be able to continue getting finances for new equipment. So there's like 7 or 8 things that happened in the Afghan conflict where the United States brought them, for instance, ball bearing equipment that the only use for it would be for what had been used for before, which is to have guidance systems for giant array like a bullet cartridge of projectiles that you put into a satellite. So you could use it to launch rockets or
there's the Star Wars we're talking about.
Right. So they started giving all these projects that couldn't be built in the Soviet Union. Whenever possible, you get photos of something, you send it to them, and they can duplicate it. There's some things that were just beyond what they had the capacity to do. So they literally had to like smuggle equipment made in Washington, D.C. into Afghanistan. And that started the trend, right? And also, what else can we do? Well, they have opium? Yeah, let's take that over. And this is all simultaneous to the Soviet Union being torn apart from the inside out by cocaine, because the CIA is using cocaine to bribe different leaders and war oligarchs of different parts of the Soviet Union. And this is leading to a point where you can't trust one town over from you because you don't know if you're going to get your supplies. So people can't trust each other anymore in the Soviet Union, except for people you can trust, which is not the way things were in the 60s. And then you've got these starving kids because their generals are selling their supplies because they're not getting all the supplies that they were supposed to get at the beginning. So things start falling apart. And then the Soviet Union basically decides, okay, Vietnam didn't work for the Americans. You know the drill. We should probably pull out. And when they do, and they start taking back their equipment, they leave behind a bunch of equipment as well. But part of the thing is they're also given GPS guidance systems. And this is the beginning of the GPS wars. After this, the Persian Gulf starts, and we've traded something from the Czechs and the Poles and given them something secretly in the back, which allows us to use GPS to invade the Persian Gulf at night, which had never been done in history. It always had been impossible. I mean, people had tried it thousands of years, but it had never been possible. And so it was this really big deal that we could do it. We could go at night because we had GPS. So I don't know. The whole thing with war in the 70s and the 80s and like the back and forth all it did was create the precedent for these international agencies that we've created to take over the world. And the Soviet Union, I think, kind of fell because of that, because a lot of the Soviet states were saying this is kind of a optimistic ideology or idea, but that because you couldn't trust each other anymore, they said, all right, we'll bribe the next town. You can't bribe me anymore. I'm tired of it.
That's just extending the corruption.
At a certain point, the corruption, it was at a certain point when they couldn't bribe them anymore because they were so disgusted that they were losing control over parts of the Soviet Union. That's when they collapsed the Soviet Union into smaller states that they could control because the corruption was starting to fix itself.
Isn't it kind of a popular idea that Dr. Strangelove is kind of like it's more than just a satire on the situation? It's actually a statement of like what a fake reality people have been relating to around the Cold War.
Kubrick said the comedy was and the satire was an aesthetic choice. Like it was.
Well, it wasn't originally set to be a comedy, even a black comedy. It was because when they first started filming, Peter Sellers was so damn funny that they're just like, oh, screw it, it's a full-on comedy. But that wasn't the original intention.
There was no other way he thought that they could actually get this movie made. I thought it was also the other thing. He's like, this is maybe the only way that we're going to get it out if it's funny and people take it as a joke, because otherwise it's way too serious and people are not going to want to see it, and they're not going to let people see it.
So speaking back to Oliver Stone, who you mentioned earlier when trying to remember Roger Stone, Oliver, have you seen the Oliver Stone watching Dr. Strangelove with Putin from a few years back? It's relatively recent.
No.
So he had like a
I try to hate this guy so much, but Oliver Stone every once.
I can hate him even more after. But
then he does stuff like this,
and that things have become more complicated or whatever. I can't remember exactly how I phrased it, but yeah, no, it's a good one. So it'll be towards the end of it. They're watching Dr. Strangelove together. It's pretty fun.
It's interesting, talking about Turkish, like Cuba and Turkey. We don't ever talk about American placing weapons in Turkey, what that did to Turkey. What it's the idea of radicalization. I mean, so much of the world that's been radicalized are places that have worked with the United States and the CIA specifically.
So two different Marines told me that this was probably 8 years ago at a Christmas party. They told me that when they hear Al Qaeda, like they're just basically like, that's either we don't know or it's us, and it's none of our business, for them to tell us that it's us. And I don't know how true that is, but that was told to me by two veteran Marines. So that we're in the Middle East. So I don't know. What do you think of that? Do you think Al Qaeda has just kind of become kind of like a term that's thrown around when they just don't even want to say who it is? Kind of just like a convenient, oh, that's Al Qaeda. I don't know.
What's the new supercar? It's not Al Qaeda. Who made the new car?
Taliban.
Taliban has a new race car. You remember that?
Taliban Batmobile.
Allegedly, it has the outside of one.
Come on, Taliban race car.
It has the body. Who knows what's under the hood?
Yeah, who knows what's inside?
So Taliban made this new supercar. I mean, have you seen the videos of Taliban dancing to American music?
Didn't Taliban, like, what was the thing that with the Star Wars connection of Tatooine, that there's like the houses that there was like something was taken over by the Taliban, or was that what it was? Do you know what I'm talking about?
First off, I gotta watch this for a second just to remind myself that, like, I know some of these people because some of these people live in England or they live in LA, and then they go jihad tourism, and then they. I mean, this is not. These are people from Canada. These are people from all over the world. They're not just from parts of the Middle East or something. There are people from the Middle East here too, but it's interesting because you've got a worldwide culture that's been assembled, and they've studied all kinds of crazy music, and a lot of them are radicalized on YouTube. So that's not that different. Al Qaeda, though, if you go back to the beginning, I think we talked about Qutb before, right? Qutb. Is that how you spell it? Qaeda Qutb. Go back. I don't know if I can spell his name, man. There we go. Qutbism. So Al Qaeda started with Qutbism. So Qutb was this dude, Saeed Qutb, and he was an Egyptian, and he lived in it. You have to remember what Egypt was like at the time. 1950s Egypt was like Los Angeles in the 90s. It was just beautiful. It was amazing. Women pop stars, electric trolleys, French, English, German. It was just the coolest place. Dude, Egypt. You want to be in Egypt in 1950. Wow. And then the CIA destroyed it, of course. But at the time, you also had this fight for secularism versus this fight for keeping Islam as part of the culture. And here's the thing. People saying that man can come up with the rules as opposed to the rules have come down from God and must be interpreted. That fight, neither side really should win that fight. I think there's kind of there's something to be asked about who's interpreting and then like who's making those rules, which men, right? Because this was an Egyptian Muslim society. But they were starting to say women were being allowed to vote. There's all kinds of changes that were coming. And we've had a revolution in Egypt every 8 to 12 years ever since, right? Ever since this happened. And they don't let women be pop stars anymore. They arrest them in the streets, etc. All that happened after Qutb. Qutb went to the United States. Qutb went to the United States and hung out with Straussian conservative from Columbia. Levi Strauss, is that right? Is that the wrong one? Peter Strauss? I forget. Whatever, Strauss.
Not the composer.
No. Strauss was blah, blah, blah. Strauss was the educator for George Bush, Scooter Libby, Lyndon B. Johnson, not Lyndon B. A lot of these kinds of people. I actually forget if it was Lyndon was also there. But Strauss isn't as well remembered as his name is because he taught the people. He didn't want to be like a photo remembered, but he wanted Gunsmoke to be the most important show, and he wanted Americans to think that the cowboy in the black hat was bad and he had to die, and the good guy had to wear a white hat, so you knew he was a good guy. He was all about creating an American mythology. He loved Marvel comics when that started to happen. He loved comic books in general, but he loved the idea of comic books, because he thought this is going to instill values in America that didn't otherwise have them. Brought Qutb to America. They went on a tour. They listened to high school dance or some sort of a local formal, community dance. Saw a bunch of Americans dancing together. Girls had never met the men before. They just get on the dance floor and they're like, "Oh, hey!" And then they start dancing. Well, how do you get here? And this is how they meet. And it just friggin' freaks him out. And he's like, "Dude, this is messed up." Like because, and then Strauss like, "Isn't it beautiful?" He's like, "No, because." And especially because of that song they were playing, "Baby, It's Cold Outside." It's like what they're doing is they're raping their children. And he's like, "What do you calm down?" He's like, "No, you are. You're taking all these people and you're putting them in bright red whorish dresses and these, shirts and these colorful things that corporations are making in America with these synthetic dyes. And you're pitting them at each other with these synthetic pheromones that you're pouring on them, and you're giving them drugs, like coffee or soda pop, which is like this lurid caffeine. We know what caffeine's like. We have Turkish coffee, and you're giving it to kids, and you're telling me that this is a good thing. I don't think it is. I think this is corporate control via sexuality of your community. And it's weird because you're like, wait a second. Al Qaeda started out with a guy who was maybe on something, maybe a little bit, because on that level, obviously it's the same thing with the saying everything's white supremacy. Like his reaction and what he thinks it is very Freudian. But on a Jungian level, if you can see where the variable is in his symbology, like, okay, yeah, the corporations are controlling people by their sexuality. You want this other thing to control it or what? Because when he gets taken back and he's thrown into treasonous jail cells and he's tortured, afterwards he's like, actually, these aren't just lurid corporate promises to steal your children. No, this is a full-on seditious vampires cult that's using a stick in one hand and a carrot in the
Right,
other.
but isn't that just it? It's always through the back door, man. It's that, the party that's so afraid of totalitarianism itself becomes totalitarian through this whole rationalized way that we have to stop this other thing. Happens all the time, right? Hey, Andreas, could you look in the private chat real quick?
Yeah, sure.
So I was just like, was kind of vague in my mind. I couldn't remember exactly what it was. So this is it. So Tatooine, town in Tunisia, inspired by Star Wars, becomes ISIS waypoint. And so you can definitely see how it was kind of sculpted after it, and that it's called what it's called too. So yeah, another trip.
Tartarine, yeah. Get rid of the R's because they're just
yeah, but this is like where is art imitating life imitating art, like the way that things
are. Now
it
is for sure, because if you saw the Mandalorian show, they're definitely talking about this kind of idea that there are like ISIS in this town.
So we know for a fact, like this was actually disclosed, whatever, that there was a lot of beheading videos, and it's known that much of that was fake. Not all of that was fake. And also the destroying of priceless artifacts, things like that. Some of that was fake too. But it's known. What is that? The CIA. Yeah, there was like a lot of this stuff was, there a lot of money went into the production of those propaganda things. So, and also, isn't it true? Like, I don't know that much about some of this stuff, but I'm like, isn't it true that like ISIS was kind of like given an ideology that was kind of manufactured through intelligence agencies? And then they kind of like made their own thing out of it and went totally rogue, and then also just like kind of splintered out into different factions. Is that true?
That's kind of what I'm saying with Al Qaeda and Taliban and ISIS and ISIL and all of them, is that by the time they're getting Western weapons, it's not any different than getting corporate money invested in your corporation. They're completely taken over. And when you can think of the Osama bin Laden situation. When Qutb died and eventually the bin Laden started financing the organization, Taliban, the money was coming from website design that he did and oil money. And, he did so many things. People don't realize he loved Final Fantasy. I mean, I don't want to make you like revere this guy or something crazy like that just because he liked the video game that we all played. But come on.
He looks a lot different in his confession video. You ever notice that?
Well, look at him also. Osama bin Laden young. I don't know if I can find. There's pictures of is this him? There's pictures of him when he was like living in America and Florida and Los Angeles, and he did not look like the same. I mean, he's a 6 foot tall guy who had dialysis, which is a other thing. Like the CIA put people 6'8", yeah, giant.
You ever seen Castro in that movie from whatever that was? What year was that? 50s or something? He was in LA. He wanted to be a movie star. Fidel Castro. Know about this? He had like it's beyond a small part. It's just like one line, maybe, if that, or something. But he was in LA trying to
trying to make it. Wow.
Yeah. No, it's a thing. You'll find an article or something on it.
Probably a lot easier to have an actor play a dictator than find a charismatic dictator.
Yeah. No, there's I'm not making this up. Look it up.
I just don't. Fidel Castro, IMDb. There you go. That'll be the way to find it.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay, actor, 1946. Easy to Wed.
Yeah, there you go.
Holiday in Mexico. Cuban rebel girls. Really? That's Errol Flynn. What? Oh my God.
Yeah, he's not going to be in there much, but he will be in there.
Still fighting in Batista. I got to see that one. The U.S. ambassador Walter Pigeon daughter falls for a Mexican pianist old enough to be her grandfather. Dang, these movies, man. Easy to Wed. To prevent a libel case against the paper, reporter tries to compromise the reputation of a tycoon slandered daughter. I like these movies, these old movies, because they're always a little bit more spicy than you remember. You're like, wait, really? Like, what the heck's going on here? I don't know. But Fidel Castro, definitely an actor. I believe it. Also a royal, but I don't know. So Qutb, he was kind of crazy. Then you've got this Final Fantasy dude, and then the CIA, and the CIA turns everything into this the same with what the Jesuits did to the Ottomans, turn them into the hyper-violent wing, use them when they could. And so I feel like that's what ISIS has done. It's been very useful to the CIA, the same way the Soviet Union used to be. And people talked about this for years, how terrorism replaced communism as this abstract threat. makes it possible for them to continue having jobs, at all.
Right. And then we have Ukraine, which is basically, people will call it a proxy war, and rightfully so. There's a side to it that it's like, Zelensky saying he wants it to be more like Israel, and we're supposed to assume that just means in terms of a draft that's like universal, like basically everyone at a certain age has some contribution to the military. That doesn't mean that they're fighting necessarily.
No, I think he thinks Ukrainians are God's chosen people, right?
So a lot of Ukrainian generals, or several Ukrainian generals, have basically been sent to Israel when they were going to be held accountable for war crimes. We're talking about prior to this war, and so there's a relationship that exists there. As far as I can tell, Zelensky's totally Zionist to the max, apparently. But then there's weird aspects, because it sure seems like they're like you're going to have some form of a cultural apartheid, not a religious apartheid, not a racial apartheid, but some kind of disjoint, because now that Russia has taken a certain percentage of Ukraine, how that resolves itself looks like perpetual conflict, and it seems kind of reminiscent of Africa.
Did you watch Secret Witch Mountain? Remember that movie with the witch kids and stuff?
Oh, of course.
A while ago.
Yeah, how could I forget?
Seth loves it. So one of the things I rewatched it recently, and I'd forgotten their box, because the box with the map and everything, I'm like, oh, that reminded me of something, right? It just had that kind of vague semblance of color schema from the Ukrainian flag. I don't know, and that's supposed to be. Oh, it wasn't. We didn't get lost in the water. We got lost in space, right? Or it was water.
Dr. Fate colors. If you show me any two colors, I can tell you all the superheroes and supervillains associated with those colors. Booster Gold, Dr. Fate.
Booster Gold, nice.
Aren't those like commonly Egyptian colors associated with like Pharaoh and stuff?
Well, that's what
Isn't
I
like
like
a thing there, the blue and gold.
Gold, yeah.
That's what's so cool about Shazam, because Shazam is like Solomon, Horus, was it? Wait, there it was right there.
There's like
Solomon, Hercules, Atlas, Zeus, Achilles, and Mercury, right?
Oh,
Shazam, right? So there's just something gnarly about Shazam, and I feel like it's also interesting. He's a foundling who's abandoned by his mother, at least in the new version. I don't think the original version, his mother abandoned him, but maybe. I mean, they don't really. Who knows? It could have been that was the deal, but it's definitely like the most Masonic superhero character.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't bad. The movie wasn't bad. I kind of enjoyed it.
Yeah, the movie's good.
I watched Invincible on Amazon Prime. I would totally recommend that. Invincible.
What did you watch?
Invincible.
Oh, the cartoon?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Yes.
Yeah, it was tremendous.
Very good. Yeah. Love it. Great series.
Yeah,
looking forward to season 2. Can't wait.
Yeah.
What's it? So what's it about? He's a superhero who
he's the son of basically a Superman character who's from a planet called Viltrum. And it's like a murder mystery. Like I don't want to give too much away because it's fun to watch it unfold.
It's very good. Yeah,
it's another take on like an invincible guy from another planet that comes to Earth.
I'll give it a shot.
Omni-Man is intense.
Yeah. It's a very intense show.
Man,
yeah, not for kids. Definitely not for kids.
You guys see the Tar movie yet?
Yeah, I loved it.
So what is Tar about?
Tar, it's about a lot, but it deals with what you could call, I guess, simply put, like culture war issues, and it's a composer who, have you seen it?
No, not yet.
Oh yeah, it's a composer who basically has like an enormous platform, and there's like a widespread respect, and it's basically her collapse from her entire career. Everything goes to shit. Am I spoiling? I don't know how to say it without spoiling, but
she's on Tar.
There's some points in the film where she basically makes some very bold statements to a kid who's kind of representative of a large demographic of university students and people who have a certain kind of shared ideology, and she kind of like fucking like
going viral, and she's tearing down woke ideology.
Yeah, she's totally. So there's that.
Great.
But then
she picks great roles in great films. Like she's not in a lot of bad movies. She was amazing in Jade Scorpion. I guess Thor 3 might be an exception. That probably not her best, but I like her. That's like one like Hollywood actress I have a lot of respect for.
so it's in contrast to her basically getting canceled. So, and then for stuff in her personal life that was inappropriate. But the thing that gets weird is you're like, okay, she's a composer, and the point that she's making of like dismissing artists of old art because you find out certain things about them, and like, just being like, she's like treating it on, art on its own level, and then she becomes the very thing that she was speaking to, where it's like now she becomes canceled, and whatever it is that she was contributing is just like squashed, so it's like
hard.
Yeah, you gotta. I feel like you got to be able to separate the artist from the art, because like people are inherently flawed, and like art is like the pursuit of perfection, but people are never going to be perfect, and it's especially coming to terms with your own old art and your own old self. It's good to be able to separate the art and the artist. Otherwise, I mean, when you look too deeply into anybody, you're going to find something to be disgusted by.
Did you guys freak out about Velma yet, or does anyone care at all?
God, everyone hates it. Even like all the lefties on YouTube hate it.
Really?
Hates it. Oh yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
They're hating it. They're like, this is a mockery of us. They're like, like, we didn't ask for this, like, and it's just, it's almost like putting a target on them. They're like, this is too obvious. Like, don't ruin people's favorite shows and blame it on us, basically.
I'm gonna see if I can find the frame I saw that was so friggin' ridiculous of it, but it was like, it's so in your face, like you said. Hold on.
And Scooby-Doo's not even in it.
Oh, really? Interesting. Yeah, there you go.
I always had a theory about it anyway. I figured, like, I remember an episode, it's like a Mandela effect myself, of Shaggy waking up in a hospital bed, and and he's looking around, he's like, what? And he's like older and everything, and they're like, shh, shh, shh. And then he's waking up. He's like, wait, what? And then they eject him in the neck, and all of a sudden, like, he fades and he sees Scooby-Doo and everyone's back there. And then this happened incrementally. And I remember this like as a whole episode, but I don't think it's real.
You were smoking DMT while watching Scooby-Doo?
I was 6, so I don't remember. It's possible, but I don't think
Sounds like
so.
the famous G.I. Joe cartoon episode where Cobra captures Shipwreck and inject him with like acid and make him think he has a whole family, and then they all melt in front of his eyes.
That's what I remember. It's like that. I remember being like, he's like, wait a second, like I had a dream that like all of you weren't real, and then as the episode's going on, he's waking up, they're drugging him more and more, and he's solving this case. But he at the end has to choose. Do you wake up and go back to a world where you don't have a talking dog? Or do you stay in the world with your friends with the talking dog? And he realizes he's crazy, but he's happy. I mean, if that doesn't,
like everything in that,
everything
else in that show is so realistic. Like the talking dog is real, but there are no real ghosts. There's no real monsters. It's always somebody trying to do an insurance scam or something.
There is, to be fair, with the Scrappy Doo and Vincent Price, the 13 spooky ghosts of Scooby-Doo. Is that the right one?
Give him a left and a right and another right.
There's like a chest full of actual demons for like a season long like Scooby-Doo.
That's like a later season one though, and the OG Scooby-Doo. It's funny, like all the villains really, you can like learn a lot about like real life scams. It's like
13
I had too much
ghosts
money in escrow, so I had to move it. It's like always like real complicated.
And a pup named Scooby-Doo. I'm a big fan of these like 80s reboots. I loved a pup named Scooby-Doo, and how Scooby-Doo had this giant mansion inside of his little pup house. I was like, that is the way to do it. As I still aspire to have a tiny little building with the CIA fort underneath it. I think Scooby had it figured out. And these skateboards, it was a great show.
I've never seen it. It's like Teen Titans Go version of this.
Yeah, it was great, and there were real monsters. Lots of real monsters. Like, wait a second, that's an actual monster.
I never
like the more super deformed the characters get, like the big heads and small bodies, and like the kind of more childish looking it is, like the more meta adult humor they get in there somehow.
A pup named Scooby-Doo. Yeah, it was great.
You know how like all these different positions have this crossover when it comes to like how people who are in the into the trans movement, people into COVID vaccination hysteria, like all these issues have this common like bodily autonomy connecting point, which to me always kind of feels like a Scooby-Doo thing. Like if you could just pull off all the masks on all the different social issues, and you're like, holy shit, big pharma is involved in all of them. Like it's like, trans, that's surgeries and medications and all this stuff, and it's like there's a perverse incentive from big pharma, and then it's like obviously freaking Pfizer, Moderna, and all that. It's like
let's walk through these 4 screens. So this is from the show. Fred's a rich white guy with a tiny dong. Those are all white people, Daphne. Coughing. White girl with too much money. white girl with too much money. Picture of guy Hiling. So I mean, this is what.
And they got Mindy Kaling to play her too, and that's like this is like her real life characters like transferring onto Velma. Like Velma is perfectly likable. All of them were likable, by the way. Like in the show, it was like a kid's, like a children's character. Like none of them had any like burning social issues.
Right, but I only had a crush on Velma though.
Yeah, Velma was pretty great.
Imagine just taking any random character and doing that to like now Pac-Man is like anti-Semitic or something.
I'm putting moderate on. Oh, even with moderate, I don't think I should show you these pictures of Velma.
I think a lot of people like Velma.
All right, that's what you get. But I'm just getting you the point. Like people love Velma. Velma's really nice, and the idea of reading is sexy. Do you remember the Susan Bright stickers? Susan Bright reading.
Did you hear the other Velma controversy? They have like a Marvel versus Capcom type video game with a bunch of different characters from all the properties.
Such a good game.
And Velma's one of the characters, and her finishing move is she calls the police, and the police come. And so many people complained that was white supremacy for her to call the police, that they had to edit the video game and like do a patch so that when Velma's finishing move is she calls the Scooby-Doo van to come. And then that makes no sense, though, because the Scooby-Doo van just kidnaps the person and drives away with them.
Dude, Velma would totally like strangle somebody if she had to. You know what I mean? With a silk.
Is that
scarf.
Velma? She doesn't have a turtleneck on.
No, this is Susan Bright. This is a positive sex third wave feminist from UCSC, but also
it's connected to the Abbey of Belina.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot there. No, that's fair.
Evoking Velma, Velma vibe.
That is definitely what she was going after. And I don't know. I think they're trying to destroy it because they're saying you don't have to find us adorable anymore or something. I don't know what it is because they're like, it's like she's become so repulsive and she feels like everyone hates her because she hates everybody.
Yeah, it's like Mindy Kaling. You're not repulsive because you're Indian. You're repulsive
now. Maybe
you're repulsive. There's a lot of beautiful Indians.
Now maybe we need to look at it differently, like because we're seeing it that way. It matters. Maybe other people could see it that way too. Maybe this isn't a bad show after all. Maybe this is the feminine equivalent to Fred Flintstone. Because if you think about it, is there like I'm so scared to type
Gavin McGinnis had a great joke where he said basically men should do to women's shows what women are doing to men's show. They could claim, oh, my whole life I grew up watching Lifetime movies. All I ever wanted to do is write for a Lifetime. And then you make a Lifetime movie about a girl with huge tits and machine guns just shooting everyone and just like take over their
tonight on Lifetime.
Why can't I write Lifetime?
That'd be a cool movie, especially if it was like a woman who didn't want it. She like was like got tricked in. She like talked into a tit job. And then eventually it turned into a machine gun. And she's like, no, and she can't turn it off. Like, I would watch that.
And then you market it as a movie that actually like it's a lady. She moves to a new town. It's Christmas time. She doesn't know anybody. But then when you actually watch the movie, it's like a violent porno.
Oh, no. She has to do that after she, like, first she does it. She goes home. Like, and then she's like in bed. She doesn't realize she kills her whole family. Lifetime. It's a Lifetime movie. You know?
And Kevin Smith watches it and cries. So,
yeah. God.
Fred Flintstone was.
I don't know why anyone didn't like He-Man just because I killed He-Man in the first episode. I mean, I don't know what the big problem is.
It goes back to Jackie Gleason, and then before that, Laurel and Hardy, and then you have obviously like Homer Simpson, Peter Griffin, Archie Bunker. Not in order, but yeah, you know what I'm saying.
I can't spell Roseanne. Roseanne is a weird character because she's supposed to be obnoxious, but she's only obnoxious because of who she is. Like as a character, the character's written to be the smarter, more clever. The sage wisdom comes from her. She's the most balanced, never hyper reactionary. You know what I mean? The whole thing is like really, she's in this amazing light, and that's not what you do to Fred Flintstone. Fred Flintstone's constantly making mistakes.
What happened?
Well, looks like he had a little Fred Flintstone. Well, that's all right.
Somebody kicked it. So he said too much about Fred Flintstone.
Somebody got upset.
Yeah, it was Monsanto. Watchdog groups for Monsanto.
I heard him say, "Oh shoot!" Before he
take your Flintstone vitamins.
He must have hit the wrong button.
We've discussed it at length, the connection between the Jetsons and the Flintstones and how they're the same world simultaneously. It's just the rich people living up above when everything's been blown back to the Stone Age with nuclear war.
Doug, you know this? I'm sorry. Yeah, I apologize for the internet just crashed for a second. But yeah, that is an important thing. Jetsons.
That's awesome.
The Flintstones. It's actually canon If you watch,
I
the
remember that movie, yeah, but
Yeah.
I didn't know it was happening at the same time. That's wild. I love it.
Right. Yeah. So they go through the cloud and they're living below them. And so it's this, the separated world, but they're able to communicate.
Mount Olympus with the Greek gods. Yeah.
And sell things. And they realize their lives up above aren't that much better than the lives below in the free world, where it's not that free anyway, because they're still quarrying for what becomes the sprockets, the necessary resources. But it's like still, it's a story where Fred Flintstone is constantly trying to do something selfish, and his selfishness is what leads him to realize that utilitarianism is the answer. That what benefits the most would also include him as part of the most. So he needs to learn that lesson every day. And that's supposed to be America, right? And that's horrible, but it's funny and it's awesome. And we don't quite do that with Peter Griffin. We don't quite do that. I mean, we sort of maybe with the Simpsons, but that's kind of the archetypical idea, is that a fool learns a lesson for us in front of us, and better than we could ever learn it, because we're willing to let the fool go. We can't accept that we're like that.
Right. Well, it started with the Tracy Ullman show, and actually the beginning of the cassette for Working Girl, and I think maybe even the theater, they had that, like when they're trying to take the photo on The Simpsons and Homer's strangling Bart, and like it was like the beginning of The Simpsons, like first season, Bart got strangled all the time, and then it was like that became less and less the gag. Like the gag was just that he was like a crazy abusive father, and that it was funny,
I mean, the other thing is, like, you remember, like, 1950s, the first boys show, Dobie Gillis. In that show, the catchphrase, the father was so the kid's always in front of the Rodin statue thinking. And, is it Bob Denver, right? From the, Gilligan's Island is the young man. Mm-hmm. But what Dobie Gillis, his father, always says is, I've got to kill that boy. I've just got to. Because he comes in and he'll always say something like, I need more money to go see a girl, and I can't work tonight. And he'll have to give him money, and because his mother will make him. It's like, I gotta kill that boy. I just gotta.
Right. And so, Jackie Gleason, the Honeymooners, always saying, "One of these days, Alice. One of these days, smack through the looking glass, straight to the dark side of the moon," or whatever he said.
Straight to the moon. The moon, Alice. The moon. Yeah. Or did he? I mean, that could be Mandela. I don't know. But so the thing is, Velma, to me, maybe we're missing the point. Maybe we're supposed to have more uningratiating female characters that are teaching women today that have lost the way, that have not been given feminist guidance that can really help, and so maybe they need to see this antithetical thing, the way we have Rick and Morty and Fred Flintstone. Maybe they need to have these horrible characters to learn how to not be. Does that make sense? Logical? Exactly.
That's Eric Cartman. That's why Eric Cartman can say and do the things that he says, because this is not. And also, they were like, "How do we?" I've seen this before. Trey Parker and Matt Stone speaking about when the whole show, the whole thing came from Eric Cartman. He was the first idea, and the idea is how do we make an All in the Family where we can have an Archie Bunker character that's relevant to today and get away with it? And they were like, "What if he's in third grade?" And that was the original premise, was like, okay, third grade Archie Bunker, and there you have it. Yeah,
it's true. Because to the eyes of a child, because at the time everyone thought everything a child said was beautiful and wonderful. It's like, well, what if it wasn't? What if it was just like the stuff that you're so afraid of? And I think
who hosted Kids Say the Darndest Things? That was Bill Cosby.
Yeah.
And if you watch those episodes now, it's more cringy than it was at the time.
Bill Cosby's back, man. He's gonna be
going on tour.
Yeah, he's gonna go on tour. I think I want to go see it. I want to go see his show. If he comes to Minneapolis, I'll go. I hope he opens with a rape joke, because I think you have to at that point.
The only way to
Is he still blind? I thought he was blind.
Is he blind? Damn.
When he came out of prison, they said he was blind. He went blind in prison. I mean,
well, hopefully he saw the light when he got out. I hope they just, if I was in prison, I'd go blind. I would do a lot of things probably.
I defend anyone the system condemns. Anyone the system defends, I condemn. It's just a knee-jerk reaction. If they say
that's
you're
the
a rapist,
thing, yeah,
you're anti-rapist.
I was gonna say
a pedophile. He's probably trying to protect kids.
There's a lot of evidence that Michael Jackson was not a pedophile,
including the fact that I don't think he was. I think
every single kid who said he was, later recanted, said he was not, and that
he was. Him. He was a victim of things that people like Macaulay Culkin and Corey Feldman could look at him and go, "Oh, he's been through it. like I have to some degree. Like he can relate on some level, and I think that was a connection. And if he was what they say, then freaking Macaulay Culkin. And I it sounds funny, but he was like, "Oh, you shared a bed with him." And he's like, "No, you don't understand how big Michael Jackson's bed was, you know." And it's like, I believe him, dude.
Yeah,
It was
his
a
bed is
room.
his
Yeah,
bedroom
yeah,
is 2 stories. But I also thought that was interesting because there's his story and her story and
Good
the
night
truth
down
and my
there.
story.
Hey,
There's ways you
babe.
could look at the story. The thing with Michael Jackson is that he created the Neverland Ranch Foundation and he's dead. So the fact that he's dead and there's a foundation that all of his money from the foundation, besides that goes to his kids, is supposed to go to other kids, orphans, human trafficking victims all around the world, that it's interesting that they shut down the guy who was doing, and very subjectively, the most good. And the less music you hear of him, the less money is going into the charity, right? Until they maybe own all of that. Maybe they're going to buy it from his kids when they realize, they're like, well, you know what? We'll give you like $50 million for it all or something like that.
He sold all of his right. He had bought like all the rights to this Beatles music, and then in order to pay for his trial, he sold all of that. Somebody here says
that's why they did all this, I think.
And I just want to say I was totally thinking Pee-wee a second ago. Somebody in the comments. So I'm like, dude, I remember that because he did the thing. He was at the, and then you're like, what kind of theater was it? Because when I was first told when I was a kid, it was like, oh, he exposed himself at a theater. And it's like, well, everyone there was going there to see sex, so it was
Florida,
a porn theater. And like, and it's this whole thing. But it reminded me with the Bill Cosby thing. It's because he came out. He was gone for a while during all that controversy, and we saw these photos, and we're like, is that the same guy? What's going on? Anyway, he came out, his first stand-up, the first thing he said when he got on stage is he went, he went, heard any good jokes lately? And it was like, dude, we had all these Pee-wee jokes at the time, you know, and it was like, dude, he handled that really well. I don't know if it was a PR team.
Like, everyone around the world knew all the Pee-wee jokes, all the what was the space shuttle that blew up? We all had the same jokes. Everybody knew. What was their favorite drink? 7-Up. You know, where'd they go on vacation? All over Florida.
Paul Rubin's rad. Paul Rubin was a dropout, or I think he was actually kicked out of CalArts, which it's like, it's a Disney school. How do you get kicked out of CalArts? I mean, people have been wondering that forever.
Dude, but I mean, there has to be something Tavistock going on with the Pee-wee, with Pee-wee's Playhouse. If you look at how many like Oscar-winning actors like got their start on like Pee-wee's Playhouse, and
because he was really into improv theater, and he was really sobered and on time, and so he was the extras in Rick and Morty, right? Like, and he did all kinds of stuff. So by the time that he was in like front of the camera, he'd met people from the Chicago 5, from the Chicago Playhouse, from Saturday Night Live, people that went
Second
on
City,
Live.
right? Did he go to Second City? Yeah. What's his name? The greatest, Phil Hartman. Phil Hartman was a really good friend of Paul Rubin, so that would have changed. As soon as you're friends with Phil Hartman, everything's different until Phil Hartman was murdered by his wife, right? Which is the worst story in Hollywood, really. I don't, unless he was not as cool, because that's the thing. He's friends with Al Franken. So what do I know? Maybe he turned out Phil Hartman.
I think he lost his shield of invisibility, invincibility when he did. What was the Turbo Man movie? Jingle All the Way. He shouldn't have done Jingle All the Way. He signed
that was his downfall. There was Jingle All the Way.
He was safe until then.
Dude, I got a Paul Rubin story. Can I share it?
Yeah, do.
I don't know how much time we got left here, but I'm gonna try. I'll try and make this short. So I was driving a taxi cab for years, and I got a call one night in the middle of the night. So it was the premiere of The Tripper, which was a David Arquette film that Paul Rubin's in. And so like I got a phone call to go pick somebody up at the Hilton at like 3 a.m. or something. And I go up there, and first like somebody works there like came and like inspected around the cab, and then he walked back, and then Paul Rubin came out. And I had the window down, and I'd been driving for like freaking like 9 hours straight, and it was early in the morning, and like his eyes were like bugging out. It was like he was so coked out. I don't know if I should be sharing this on recording, but whatever, live, whatever. Screw it. I don't know. I've shared this on a podcast, but yeah. So anyway, so he didn't say anything, and I didn't say anything, and I'm not even exaggerating. It was over a minute of us like looking at each other, like he looked like he was like waiting, like, are you gonna say something like mecca like a high mecca hiney ho or anything? And it's like, and I recognized him, but I just looked at, and then his friend came out. His friend didn't know where he parked his car. He knew it was at a Safeway. He didn't know which side of town it was. So I was driving him all around, and he kept on having these kind of innuendo type statements related to people, and I didn't know if he was saying what I thought he was saying. I was like, what are you saying? And then when I finally found his car and he's leaving, he stops and he goes, I just had anal sex with Pee Wee Herman. He didn't say Paul Rudd, he said with Pee Wee Herman. And he was all stoked. He just had sex with Pee Wee Herman. He was very proud and very enthusiastic about it. He was like having a great night. And I just said to the guy, I was like, good for you. And then that dude is co-stars with him in the Pee Wee's sequel movie that was like the Netflix like Pee Wee sequel,
okay.
Holiday or whatever the fuck it's called. And so he told me like he's some show, I forget what it was. I used to tell people it's Breaking Bad, but that's incorrect. So whoever his main guy is that shows up from New York that he goes out to see in that movie, I can't say I'm 100, but I literally am like 99% sure that was the guy that I was driving. I think he said his name was Joe. But yeah, anyway, it was weird because I watched this Pee Wee movie and it tripped me out because I'm like, dude, and he's got this metal plate in his head, and my last name's Plate. I don't know.
David
personal.
met Pee Wee Herman, Paul Rubens' lover. Like that is
right, but the thing that's crazy
so
too is I was telling somebody this a couple years afterwards, and they pointed out to me that Hilton is on Mount Herman Road.
Oh yeah,
Mount Herman. You know what I'm saying?
There's some weird stuff about that too.
Yeah.
Pee Wee's Big Adventure was Tim Burton's directorial debut.
yeah. So they have a thing.
I'm gonna pull us through some of these. Make sure you guys go to VBDC Venice Beach Dub Club on Linktree. Click on his store, buy his stuff, watch his music videos, and check out his Instagram as well as
working on the album VBDC 2 right now, coming out later this year.
Return of VBDC. Nice.
And he's got the show that he does, Talkie Time.
Talkie Time
with his new backdrop.
Yep, and that's 6:00 California time on Instagram Live. You can come hang out with the Talkie Time fam.
Definitely, guys. Make sure you're watching that. The sync book. Go to the sync book. Go down to, or this is the way I like to do it. Click on the Syncflix picture. You can also click on videos to get there. Go here. Click on Syncflix, and in Syncflix you got David's work. All these amazing synchronicities. I like to watch them throughout the week while I'm working on stuff. They are amazing.
One that I want to recommend because of our conversation today is actually the movie Atomic Blonde with Blondie's album that has Atomic on it, Eat to the Beat. So there it is.
That's so cool that I remembered it. I was like, I remember that. It was 2019.
Yeah, if you want a good one relating to the Cold War and just a super solid sync that has some really cool points, I'd recommend this one.
Dude, okay. Atomic Blonde.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I'll definitely I'll just check that out. I bet you can get away with that. That's about the amount I can get away with.
Oh yeah. Careful with Blondie. Yeah, you can't go over 3 seconds. You might be in trouble. Yeah.
Oh my God, those people. And then the illustrious Mr. Douglas. Hold on, there we go. Load. Mr. Douglas is doing amazing things, and he's going to be in jet planes coming to a place near you. I mean, you're going to be drinking champagne by your fireplace on your rug made of bear skin. Or maybe a cow hide from IKEA with your lover from Sweden or from Belgium or something, and then you're gonna be listening.
Beautiful exotic place.
You're gonna be listening. You'll be like, "Remember Spain?" While Michael Jackson plays, and then the song is gonna switch. It's gonna be like Ingo Swann read to you with amazing atmospheric sounds and environment by Mr. Douglas, and you're gonna be like, "Really?" Because there's so many. How could it possibly just be one man? And you'll
thank you.
Change your life.
Hard at work doing the audiobook for Ingo Swann's Secrets of Empowerment, volumes 1 and 2. They are fantastic foundations for an expanded mind, especially into the world that we are rapidly leaning into these days. I'm really enjoying the work, and it's eye-opening, especially when listening to such insightful dialogue with you three. It helps me find a place to stand on and understand not only society and its push against an individual's natural desire for growth and empowerment, but also how through this kind of conversation that we are having, we can absolutely do that and get past society's feeble attempts to curtail and corral what we naturally are, which is a power species dripping with it.
We gotta stop the monopoly guy. That's who they know. They're the monopoly guy. That's what it is. It's the monopoly guy. Don't trust him. All right, guys. We'll see you next time. Love you very much. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Pleasure.